Recording in progress.
Good, thank you. Do we start?
Yeah, I think we're live. We're going.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the December 1st, 2021 Select Board meeting. We have a very full agenda, so we are just going to get started, as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance.
We're muted.
You're muted for some reason.
Hold on.
Should I repeat that then? Slight smile. Can you hear us?
Can we just assume everybody knows the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah.
So we can just do it?
Yeah.
Then we'll be
Okay.
good.
We're all set now.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, sorry about that. I assume we're unmuted now. As I was saying previously, we have a really full agenda, so we're just going to get started. And we are starting with public comment. So, I just should mention, if anyone is attending virtually, you can raise your virtual hand on Zoom. And while we're at the high school, people can comment in person here. You can also watch the meeting online on Zoom or Government Access TV or Facebook Live, and also on the Government Access channel. But again, if you're on Zoom watching virtually, you can, joining virtually, you can raise your virtual hand. And if you send me an email at ptitcomb, my first letter of my first name and my last name at swampscottma.gov, if you have questions, I'll check my email and try to answer those questions during the meeting. So, thanks. And so there's one person here who I believe wants to make public comment. If you can just grab that microphone next to you, sir, or stand up if you don't mind, and just state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Name's David Lawless, also known as Archie. 11 Ramsey Road, Marblehead, Mass. I represent the Swampscott DPW Union. I'm standing before you not knowing the status of our contract. I don't know if the contract, if the board has taken no public vote on the contract, so we don't know if it's up or down by the Board of Selectmen. So I'm either asking for your support or an explanation. That would be my public comment. I address that to the chair.
Sure. So generally, during public comment, we don't respond, but
Right, but it's not on the agenda, and you're continuing minutes from last meeting where it was on.
I understand. So I was going to continue to say, but I'm happy to provide a response in this instance briefly. The board has not voted on the contracts yet, and if you have concerns, I encourage you to reach out to our town administrator, Sean Fitzgerald.
There has been no vote.
That's correct.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any hands raised, Ally, and, oh, there's one.
This person may be in regards to the car dealership, or to press two, just so you know, but we not.
Sure. Did you unmute her?
Hi.
Hi, Jennifer. If you could
hi
just state
there.
your name and address before you start speaking, that'd be great. Thanks for joining.
Oh, you're welcome. Jen Murphy. I live on Franklin Ave. I know that there is a licensing request for someone who wants to have a dealership. And we're concerned on Franklin Avenue as to the changes this will cause, where a car is going to be stored. There's a parking problem down by Franklin and Paradise Road already, so we don't want to see more cars there, and it's getting really quite dangerous to try and pull out of our driveways. Many of us have all, been hit or near hit several times trying to get out. And we just like to, I'm sorry to speak before the licensing issue is going up, so I don't have any other details, but we are very concerned about that.
Great, thank you for sharing, Jen, and I'm not sure if you're staying on for that discussion soon, but
Well,
you're welcome to stay on. We'll be talking about that shortly, and if you have any additional comments, you can share them at that time as well, so.
brilliant,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
All right, so I think that is it. I'm just gonna check my email. Okay. All right, so that's it for public comment. We're gonna move on now to the town administrator's report.
Okay, so we continue to see increasing cases of COVID-19. We are watching very carefully the emergence of a number of variants. And this Friday, I have a meeting with Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito and a number of the state's top epidemiologists to really look at how this Omicron variant is affecting certain populations. We're going to monitor this carefully, and we just ask folks just to be careful and continue to get vaccinated. The most important thing that we can do is ensure that we have all of our citizens vaccinated from this virus and, continuing to increase their immune response. As a follow-up to our last meeting on infiltration and inflow, we did work closely with David Peterson, the engineer from Kleinfelder, and Gino Cresta, our assistant town administrator and DPW director, did some outreach work to DEP, MWRA, and a number of communities to really look at their II regulations. We will have a opportunity to have a follow-up conversation with both David and Gino at our next meeting, but we've tried to get a sense of where Swampscott would fit within a peer group. We have significant II needs, as we outlined in that last presentation. I feel strongly that we've got to start from a position of really addressing those needs, and right now we're looking at creating a model that we'll show at our next meeting that looks at the revenue that we likely would generate given the types of developments that we've seen over the last decade in Swampscott. That said, there's some additional information in here about the peer communities analysis. We did look at thresholds as well. When we look at the thresholds between single-family units and multifamily units, we feel comfortable that the standard will really capture the larger developments and provide a reasonable fee for small renovations that families will have. So happy to address any questions that the board would have. Tonight we'll hear an update from our town assessor and our assistant or our town treasurer, Patrick Luddy, to go over the 2021 tax classification. We have looked at the financial forecast and we'll be stepping through some analysis on free cash. Last week I met with the retirement board to discuss their vote to decrease the investment return for retirement investment funds down to 7%. The board has had a goal of fully funding our unfunded liability, and I asked them to work with the town as we carefully tried to meet broader needs. That adjustment would place an additional $100,000 increase in the retirement line, one of the biggest lines that we have in our town budget. And, I want to be mindful that, we have a number of other increases that we're juggling, and we're trying to keep a careful handle on how we develop the FY23 budget. I am pleased to report that Swampscott has signed on to the Commonwealth's commitment to achieve a net zero emission by 2050. This is in line with a number of our broader policy goals about environmental sustainability, and certainly puts Swampscott in a good position to take advantage of grants and opportunities that are coming down the road. I have received a proposal for an HR assessment and audit that would include recommendations for reorganizing the HR role and really looking at a number of regulatory compliance and FMLA standards and review of job descriptions and other HR functions and areas. Previously, I engaged CLA to do this 3 years ago. They do this as one of their professional auditing responsibilities, and they have a team of really expert HR professionals that can help us really just look at our existing policies and practices and establish a roadmap to help us build a 21st century HR function. I expect that this will kick off over the next 2 weeks and conclude over the next 60 days. Hi there. Last week I did have an opportunity to meet with the men's club at the senior center and the captains of the high school football team. We had a really excellent conversation with a men's club that hadn't met in close to 2 years. It was staggered, and certainly every member of everyone that attended, and we had over 50 or so individuals there, everyone shared a story or perspective, and it was really nice to see that group of older residents engaging with our younger residents. So really special opportunity there. And just this afternoon, I joined a couple of staff from Care Dimensions to light the hospice tree in front of Town Hall. Holidays are a wonderful time for a lot of people, but we do have a lot of people that are dealing with the loss of loved ones, and it's a nice reflection at this time of year to think about, how important it is to reach out to those that are dealing with some of the challenges that the holiday season brings. And just to remind everybody that we should be a little kinder and a little more generous in spirit during these days. And happy Hanukkah to all those celebrating the season of light. That's my report.
Okay. Questions about anything in Sean's report? Okay. I just have a question on the HR assessment. Is this going to include, from what I'm trying to remember from our the letter that we read a couple of weeks ago, if it includes also a consultant that's going to fill the role or help hire somebody who will be permanently sitting in that role? I just want to make sure that that's part of this.
It can. I didn't ask for that initially. I wanted them to come in and help us really just establish a baseline for the office, but I certainly would be happy to include that into the scope of work.
So the CLA that's something that they could do also?
It is something that they have done.
Okay, thanks. Okay, all set then? So, great. So, is Marzi going to join us? The next item on the agenda is to discuss and approve. Do we have to officially vote on this? I didn't think we did. We do, okay. To vote and approve, to approve and accept an easement between Swampscott Conservation Commission and the White Court LLC for a public pedestrian pathway at 35 Littles Point Road. And Marzi, who is the Director of Community Economic Development, I'm sorry, is here on Zoom joining us to give us some more detail about that. Hi, Marzi.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to request your vote on an easement agreement. Ally, if you could, we have a very quick PowerPoint presentation for you so you can actually see the location of the easement and actually what it looks like. So as many of you might recall that as part of the redevelopment of the White Court project, the developer agreed to create or construct a path that would that is joined together with the Blytheswood path that allows recreational access or pedestrian access to a lookout area. And actually what you see on the screen right now, and you can really see, is this beautiful stone lookout area at the end of the easement, which shows these beautiful ocean and really allows our residents to have access to the ocean. So again, this is something that the developer of White Court, they built out on their own, and this document or the easement that Town Council requested, that the Select Board would be the signatory on it. Ellie, if you can go to the next page, I just wanted to share with you a couple other images. So you can actually see this is the image. The easement is located off of Little Points Road. So many of you might be familiar where the former White Court, O'Marion Court College was located. So the easement runs along the path between the Blytheswood and between White Court. And like I said, it terminates at the end of or by the ocean. What you see in front of you here is actually the engineering plans. It really shows a 10-foot path. So you can see in this graph shows the easement that is a 10-foot easement that's delineated between the sort of like a dark line and the dotted line. And then you can really see kind of like the wavy area, which is the Mandarin path, and how residents are able to walk along it. And it really terminates at the end where you see the sitting area. Could we go to the next page, to the next photo too? And these are just some images of what the area looks like. The first image on your left is really the new structure, the White Court structure, and you can really see the path as it meanders between the woods and the utility poles in here. And then the second image is taken from the end of the lookout area as you look towards Little Points Road. And then the final image is what I had shared with you at the very beginning of what the terminus of the path looked like. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any regarding the document.
Hi, Marzi. I did have a question. What's the parking situation like at White Court for the public?
Absolutely. So as Ellie, if you can go back, maybe I had another additional image that maybe we can share with you, the extra page. So you can see this page is the Little Points Road is a public way, but sort of if you were to take the driveway, if you go through the stone gate, that area is a private property. So the only parking available for the public will be on Little Points Road. We are working with the DPW staff and the DPW department to delineate and mark off parking areas, 2 parking spaces along Little Point Road for our residents that would use this path.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
I should also share with you that Town Council reviewed this document, and this document was also reviewed by the Conservation Commission, reviewed and approved by the Conservation Commission.
Great. Well, this is exciting, Marzi. Can I just ask, What is the, like, diameter of the, it's hard to get a sense in pictures of that seating area.
I want to say at least 10 feet, maybe a little bit more.
Okay. That's great.
And it's really nice. One of the, a couple of the bricks that are there, the developer took care and was able to preserve some of the bricks from the Marion Court College. I think there was a marker from one of the students that you can really see their name at the bottom of the lookout area into the stone path.
Great. Peter, you had a question or something?
Yeah, is there anything in this easement that would allow us, if we wanted to put a sitting, the ability to have a seating area in the view easement, in the scenic overlook? I noticed that it's completely barren of anything. I mean, I guess people could sit on the wall, I guess. But I'm just questioning whether, what under this easement rights do we have to amenitize it with signage and with seating?
So we are looking to put signage in there. We wanted to do some interpretive signage, at two locations, at Little Points Road that would direct residents to this area, and also within the the sitting area. At this point, I think the area is fairly small. I think if you're thinking of putting a bench or something like that in there, the way that the stone wall is constructed, it's really at a perfect height for somebody just to be able to sit there. I will have to double check in regards to our ability to bring additional, benching if that's what your request is. Because I did not see anything in here that would allow us to bring in additional infrastructure or additional furnishing and things like that.
Is there anything that you see in here that allows you to put signage?
No, there was nothing on signage in here, but I feel confident that we can put signage on Little Points Road, as that is a public way.
But not signage directing them once they're on the property as to where the actual easement is?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Is that something that you would like to see included in this document?
So perhaps we can go back and just ask if we can include some language in there that would allow us to put some seating, amenities and some signage. I think, those are important considerations, and perhaps, if the board is interested in seeing that, we can come back at our next meeting and present whatever we can negotiate.
Marcy, was that raised at all during the conversations, and was there any, hesitation noted or anything about signs or seats?
No, we did not discuss it. We did talk about signage because we are very proud of the history of this site, and we would like to share the the history of Whitecourt, the history of the area, and even actually, be able to highlight some of the points of interest within the harbor or, areas along the waterfronts. So that is something that we did want to discuss. So I'm more than happy to go back to the developer and ask them to do that. The site as you enter Whitecourt is really clear that, areas or certain areas are marked as private property with no trespassing. But once you enter the gates on foot, you will see, you can clearly see the path. And I think if we had really good signage over there, signage of Little Point Road, I think that would direct residents to the lookout area. But again, I'm happy to go back and request, signage and or seating area. My only concern would be that, having any furniture on the ocean without that being secured, I would be concerned that could be a public like a safety issue, but, that it doesn't, not fly away, but, it's not wind blown off the site, or it could cause any potential damage to any property or person.
Any other questions? Okay, so, Peter, do you have thoughts? I'm okay with not having
No,
this seating,
I
but-
guess, so I'm gonna abstain in the vote. I'm not gonna vote for unrelated reasons, but I guess my question is, Marzi, you might know the timing sensitivity of this, but typically we have 2 readings of documents. And this is getting a vote in 1 reading, and I'm just wondering why that is.
No, we initially, it was our understanding that this being an easement, recreation easement, that this document only needed the signatures of the Conservation Commission. We went back to council to seek their review and their sort of approval prior to go into the Conservation Commission. They suggested that the select board should be part of this. And you are correct. Each of our sort of documents that seek your signature, we do have 2 readings. So I don't see any reason to rush and have this fine today. I can go back and, request or speak with the developers regarding the seating and signage. So please let me know if that is the wish of the board, and then I can report at the next meeting in regards to their response back regarding those 2 issues.
Thanks, Marzi. I think that makes sense. There's no harm in that.
Yep.
Can I just ask Marzi, so you don't know, my understanding is that they were looking to close on units this month, and that they were
Yes,
trying to get this done first because of title issues? It would need to be recorded before the master deed and other documents?
So my understanding, I spoke with one of the principals earlier today, and my understanding was that they needed to document the payment in lieu of, or document the payment in lieu, and that needed to be recording. This could be done at a later point, at a later time. That does not have to be done consecutively with the closings.
So I just want to make sure that our council is focused on the recording order of things, and that we are getting SNDAs from lenders that get filed before this, so that this doesn't get wiped out in the event of a foreclosure of any type. So we just need to make sure that we're just focused on the title priority of this document.
Absolutely.
So again, I'm going to abstain. Procedurally, I just wanted to know procedurally, because I want to respect the integrity of things. If there's a reason to vote it tonight because of that, I would hate for us to hold up a project for this personally, but I don't hear Marzi saying there's a reason.
I don't think there's a reason. I think these are good reasons to go back and have a careful conversation with the developer, and we'll get back to the board with any updates that we receive.
So are you saying that you think we should take the time or should not take the time?
No, I'm saying that if there was a reason that we needed to vote tonight, that I just want people to be aware if there was a reason that the vote needed to happen.
Sounds like we're pretty sure, Marzi, but not entirely sure. Is that?
Well, you know what, I mean, why don't we, if it's okay with you, I will do my best to see if I can call one of the principals right now as the meeting goes on, and then maybe I can report shortly, and I can report right back to you if that would be acceptable. But one thing that I would like to receive from you at all is just a clarification on the seating. So please tell me what your thoughts are. Is it just a bench or single benches? So I just want to be clear on that.
I don't have thoughts on seating, but if anyone else does.
Marzi, I think from time to time it may change. It might just be, accommodations. There may be some need for ADA accommodations with seating, and there may be other needs. We just likely want the ability to work with the grantor to ensure that we have the ability to provide seating.
So it would be temporary or permanent seating?
I would say, we just want the ability to provide seating.
Okay.
I don't know if it needs to
Either
be-
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, the more flexibility.
we
The
don't,
better.
Certainly temporary would be in there, but.
Yeah.
we want it as broad as it needs to be.
All right, thank you.
So yeah, I think, why don't we just hang on, is everyone comfortable with that, and see if Marzi, you make any progress, and then, is that okay? Or do you wanna just,
Yeah, I
Table?
think we can get back to the board if there's an exigency that is somehow,
okay,
that makes it impossible, we can,
all right. So let's just consider this a first reading then, and we can put it on the 15th, for the 15th, unless there's,
Sorry, I think, were you, to the chair, I think Marzi wanted to reach out to a principal and see tonight, to see if it needed to happen tonight, because there was a timing issue.
right. I just think, my understanding was Sean was recommending
if we want to
not
do
rushing
that,
it.
Marcy, please, if,
No, I'm sorry, I just heard you said if there's an exigency, then we'll do something, but that means tonight.
yeah, Marcy can
That's all,
shoot me
that's
a
why
text.
I misunderstood if you were saying delay.
Okay then, I'm gonna just say, we're gonna wait and see if you can reach them, Marzi, and we'll decide later if you cannot.
Absolutely.
So we'll
I'll be
circle back
right
around, and you can just text one of us if, when you have a answer, we can come back to you.
And I'll be back on, because I'm here, I will speak on one of the other items, so I will get back to you one way or another. Thank you.
We appreciate it, Marzi, thank you. All right, I apologize. We're going to move on to the next item of the agenda. It's scheduled for 6:30, public hearing. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 56, the Select Board will be holding a public hearing on Wednesday, December 1st, 2021, at 6:30 in Room B129 at Swampscott High School, 200 Essex Street, Swampscott, Mass., and broadcast on Zoom for the purpose of discussing an application from Hanley Dela Cruz Euroline Motorsport, Inc. for a Class II automobile dealer's license for the premises located at 218 to 222 Paradise Road, Swampscott, Mass., map 5, lot 209. Anyone desiring to be heard, should I read that? Should appear here, and you can share your comments at this time. So is there a motion to enter a public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so, let's see.
Holly, do you want to have Molly?
I believe Molly's, yeah, she's gonna be, hi Molly, joining us on Zoom, and you'll be giving us, an
Just a
overview.
brief introduction. Yeah, so you have here tonight Hanley Dela Cruz and Chris Scannell representing Euroline Motors, which is located on 218 to 222 Paradise Ave. It is the former Silver Star location. So back in the end of 2019, there was an opinion issued by the building inspector at the time that led Hanley to seek a zoning board opinion on the on-site parking and on the use of being able to sell used cars on site. The ZBA issued a decision, and it was their opinion that the use was valid and that Hanley could continue the use. That use was previously used by Silver Star Motors. The ZBA obviously recommended that the owner needs to seek a new Class II license under the new ownership name. And then, of course, we ran right into March 2020 and the shutdown. So Hanley came in earlier this year to apply for the Class II. His use permit granted by the ZBA still being valid because all of them has been extended. So he is in front of you tonight seeking that Class II license after going through the process of inspections and providing all the information needed for that. He's seeking a license to sell 8 cars. I've obviously shared with him our concerns about that number. Our current license holders, the one across the street, the Sicko Paradise, is up to 4 cars, and I believe 460 Humphrey Street is a maximum of 6 cars. And so he is here tonight to discuss his request, and I see that we also have public comment as well. So I'll turn it over to Hanley and Chris, who are right in front of you, to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, hi. And if you can just introduce yourself again, even though,
My name is Hanley De La Cruz.
great, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. So I'm applying for like a 8-car used dealer license. It will easier my business, and it will help me in the future for my kids and my family. And I want to move away a little bit from repair, more like selling than anything else. Yeah. So,
What?
I didn't know somebody else speaking or.
I don't think so.
Pardon me?
Are you with,
No, I'm kind of mentoring him.
yeah.
that's, I didn't get the sense
Yeah.
that
Try
you
to
were
help
going
him
to share,
develop his
so.
business more,
Yeah.
he's an unbelievable mechanic, he's a master mechanic with Audi. And just trying to help him become more efficient as a business person,
Yes.
from accounting to compliance to expanding.
Yeah.
And can you just state, since you just spoke, can you just state your name and address for
Chris
the record?
Scannell. I don't have any kids, he's my project.
We all need something.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to ask other board members if they have questions?
No, so,
Specific questions?
no, so Molly, so just a point of clarification. So current license holders across the street and, down Humphrey Street are 4 and 6, is that correct?
The Sicko is definitely 4. I believe Four Seasons is 6.
Four Seasons is 6.
Got it. Okay, so the 8.
Or 40. 6 or 40.
Or 140.
So, Mr. Dela Cruz,
Yes.
where exactly can you put these 8 cars that you're requesting today?
Right in front of my property, like right in front of, it's a big parking space in front of it. So I'd be able to show and display the cars.
So how many parking spaces total do you have on?
The whole property, I think, is 22 parking space.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
So, one concern I think that we heard from a resident who lives in the area.
Okay.
Earlier, and traffic and congestion and on-street parking is a concern for residents in the area. And it's my understanding also that, as much as it might not be enforced at the current moment, it doesn't seem, Paradise Road, which is Route 1A, it's a state road, prohibits parking on the street.
Yes.
And so, and I want your business to be successful. I want
Thank
you to
you.
be able to fulfill your professional goals. But, there is a concern that the concern, I guess, from residents who live in the area, that there's already cars from the business during the day anyway. I don't know what happens at night, parked on the street. And then the additional concern that it's actually not technically allowed in that area. So I just am concerned how, if that's happening prior to adding 4 or 8 more cars, how that issue is going to be addressed.
Well, I want to move my business more to selling than fixing. That's number one. And number two, some of the car like in front of my business, some of them, they're not mine. Some are up the street or across the street, so I want to move more to selling cars, maybe repair the cars for selling. So I want to move more towards selling. Yes.
So you saying that you're going to replace some of the cars there for repair?
Yes,
The
I want to
idea.
do less repair and more selling cars.
It's much more profitable.
Yes.
Especially with this background.
Yeah,
That transition might take a little bit of time though, right?
yes.
Because you don't want to,
Yeah, I got
you might do whatever your mentor's telling you, but it seems that,
And he does not leave cars on the street overnight,
No.
ever.
Yep.
And a lot of the cars are there for pickup or drop off or staging to get into one
Yeah,
of the garages.
I got up always moving cars around. Yes,
Nothing's ever really parked there.
yeah.
No, but there are cars parked during the day from
During-
8 o'clock to 5 PM
Yes.
on the street.
Yes,
And I understand it's not just your business,
Yeah.
there are other businesses as well.
Yes.
Legally parking on and alongside Paradise Road.
yeah,
yeah, and that's why it does on some level seem unfair to say, well, you can't park in the street, but up the road, well, along the road, we know that there's parking. So it's
Yeah.
not to single you out in that respect. It's
Yeah.
just that, given that it's a concern, to approve something knowing that it's a concern already,
yes,
and that there isn't a way to mitigate the concern. separately or in conjunction with this, is, I think, at least what our intention is here.
Okay.
So I want to allow other people to,
See if there's public testimony. People from the public that want to
Oh.
comment.
yeah. Is there anybody else that wants to speak from the public on this? Ally, just if, would we see? Okay. And there's someone here that wants to speak. If you don't mind, sir, either speaking into that microphone or coming up to the stand, and just state your name and address, please.
Fred McDonald, Swampscott Ave. So, I don't know when the license transfer took place or not, but there's cars on Swampscott Ave from that place of business. They're anywhere. Sorry, what? That's the new clinic. Oh, sorry. So sorry, Greg McDonald, Swampscott Ave. So there's cars from the business, and I don't know when the licenses have transferred. But there's about typically 4, 5, 6 cars right at the end of Swampscott Ave, across from the Lynch House. And those cars typically are there from anywhere from a few days to several weeks to the longest I think I've seen was about 3 to 4 months. So these are not cars that are, being repaired. Maybe someone drops it off early in the morning, picks it up the next morning. These are parked there, storage, long-term. Like I said, there's been cars there literally for months. And there was one car that had, no tire on it for 3 or 4 days. It was jacked up. I know there's been some disagreement on whose cars they are. I know that there are, and I don't know if they're employees, but people who I would assume work at your place of business who get in and out of those cars. I've seen them moving them around when they do move. So my concern is, I don't know what these cars are. I don't think they're repair vehicles because they sit there so long. So I don't know if they're being sold or not. They're mostly, I would say, not great condition cars, older. Sometimes there's some higher end cars there. So I don't really know what the business is, but I can tell you it's basically used as a storage lot.
Now, just to that point, is this cars from Mr. Dela Cruz, or are these cars from the business across the street, or are you unsure?
But when I say across the street, I mean the former Silver Star Motors building and those people.
Okay. Thank you for clarity.
So, Mr. De La Cruz, there's really, I don't think there's a person here that doesn't want you to be successful.
Okay.
Swampscott's one of the most densely settled towns in the Commonwealth, and we have a lot of neighborhood concerns about pedestrian safety and the number of cars that are just parked in and around the site. You've had a few conversations with staff about the number of vehicles that we've previously allowed through this permit. It was 4, and so it's like you're looking for 8, and that's a significant increase. We're trying to balance some of these needs, and I think part of it is you've got a business plan that you want to transition from working on cars that frankly you could have 20 people show up one day and say, hey, fix my tire, fix my alternator, and you have to sequence and schedule, and you're going to be selling cars as well, and it sounds like this could be a real busy site. And so the concerns, I think, are we going to make things worse without giving you a chance to kind of demonstrate that you're going to really be able to manage that careful sequencing of your business?
Yeah, like I say, I want to transition from mostly repair to selling cars.
Yep.
So I'll be selective of my repairs that I do.
Sure.
So that's why I'm applying for this license. I don't want to have too many cars, because if I have cars sitting around, I'm not going to make no profit.
Understood.
So that's why I want to have cars to sell, and it will be more profitable for me. Yes.
think he'd be open to, you know, start out with less cars and
Yeah.
prove himself. So start out with something comparable to what the other vendors have,
Sure.
and then come back and maybe ask for the additional to 8 if
Yeah.
he is compliant.
So I just am mindful of the time here, and I wanted to get to the public comment on the Zoom, who are joining by Zoom. So we have Robert Bartolomeo.
Yes,
Hi there. If you can
Hi.
just state your name, I apologize if I mispronounced it, and your address, please. Thank you.
my name is Robert Bartolomeo. I live at 84 Franklin Avenue, Swampscott. Over the past, I don't know, at least 7 years, there's been a ton of parking from around Silver Star. Cars left 1 week, 2 weeks. I see employees walking around the corner, dropping them off. I've had a couple of words with a couple of employees, left cars in front of my house. The street is a mess right now because of a lot of speeding issues, cars coming around from Paradise onto Franklin. And a lot of young kids now in that neighborhood, and we have a lot of concerns about this.
Thank you, Mr. Bartolomeo. And then we have Jennifer Murphy, who has her hand raised as well. Oh. Jennifer, sorry to call you out if you wanted to subtly lower your hand, but if that was an accidental lower and you do want to speak, please just raise your virtual hand again and we can get back to you. And Mr. Bartolomeo, you were finished, right? I didn't interrupt you? Okay, thank you. Other questions from board members?
Yeah, so I guess from my perspective, I have a couple of thoughts. If there was a zoning application, it would have been helpful to us to have the zoning decision here, because that would tell us what the findings were of the zoning board. We're talking about a lot of things that are the proper jurisdiction of zoning, and my concern is that these are legitimate concerns, but the zoning board, my guess is unanimously approved this use, which means they've thought about all these things as well. And so it would really be helpful to us to be able to have the benefit of seeing those decisions, just because I think under the statute, things that we're talking about here are not actually what the general law is talking about when we're issuing Class 2 car dealer licenses. The stuff we're talking about tonight is actually, planning and zoning stuff. So that's comment number one. Comment number two for me is look at, I think a lot of the problems that are happening in the neighborhood is because we don't enforce. Just candidly, we don't enforce. Kind of hard stop. We can't cite a single example in the last 12 months of enforcing, I'm sure, candidly, and so that's why cars, if we looked at the Citgo special permit across the street, there's specific restrictions on how many cars they can have parked where, et cetera, et cetera. The parking on, I know exactly what Greg McDonald's talking about on Swampscott Avenue. It quite literally is an extension of a commercial parking lot. Quite literally. Is what it is. And so there's not any enforcement there. And I hate to have this applicant suffer the consequences because others before him, not him, as well. And that so I appreciate that we say, hey, we want people to be successful and we're a densely populated town. We want to be here to help. But one way to help is actually to ask people to follow the rules that are set and enforce it. And that's why we have these things, is to enforce them. And when that's done, we are able to see a normal environment. Okay, well, with the rules implemented, we know this works. And so what happens is we're put in this really difficult position where the rules aren't being enforced. People are not following them. And as a result, we're in this awkward situation where we're saying, well, we're not going to give him a permit to follow the rules because others aren't following the rules, and we're, as a town, aren't enforcing the rules. And I just think as though it's a vicious cycle, and it's very unfair to the applicant. I would be open to a lesser number to start to see, because I appreciate what you're trying to do here, and so I'd be open personally to a lesser number here, but I find it, I find us ill-equipped to deal with things that I think planning staff, I want to empower Molly and Marzi and the whole team to really, before the zoning board, make recommendations to address these things, to make sure there's compliance issues, so that they feel empowered, because they're not the compliance staff by any means, right? But to make sure that they feel empowered as well to help us do these things, because I don't think we're getting a true picture of what the rules are, because the rules aren't being followed, and we're part of that problem right now. So I hope that we could fix that, because I think that's a really important thing, so that when an applicant such as this comes forward, we can feel better about our decision, whichever way it is, right? Because we know from experience, and just doesn't, I'm uncomfortable with it, but for the purpose of tonight, knowing the history of the site, I can be comfortable with 4 cars with probably some conditions on it.
Molly, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I wanted to suggest a couple of things and maybe give some more context. So, with the discussion, if the board doesn't feel necessarily ready or wants, condition recommendations, I'm happy to work with Hanley and bring back kind of a parking plan and have him walk you through that, so he can better show you what he means and what spaces he's going to use, and also recommend some, conditions that would go along with that. The building inspector and I have actually been out to that area many times and have been talking about enforcement. A lot of times he doesn't necessarily have any power. I have no enforcement power in this case, but I work with him a lot. It really depends on what the zoning decision is. It is a state road, and so I've been trying to work with the police department on how we kind of enforce this and coordinate this, because while it is a state highway, I believe we do have, jurisdiction to enforce no parking. So it's really got to be a coordinated effort on that front, and I'm happy to continue kind of bring more information on that back to you if that would be helpful for everyone.
So, Molly, that's confirmed, right?
Yes, so I spoke with Angelica at the police station.
Okay. We have to wrap up in just a minute, but I wanted to get back.
Something else? Or?
Hold on, sir,
Okay,
please.
sure.
Thank you. There is Jennifer Murphy's back on the virtual Zoom, and you wanted to make another comment, Jennifer?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I agree with Peter. The whole enforcement aspect is really unclear. And it's not fair to the business. It's not fair to the residents. And we really need to know how we can work together and what the rules are, because it is a mess right now. And it's a safety concern, and we don't want someone to be injured or killed with the traffic, but we are concerned, definitely. Like 8 cars seems like a lot, and we have absolutely seen cars left overnight on Franklin Ave. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I can take, if your comment is very quick, because we
Yeah, just real quick, maybe, one thing is if the business really wants to move towards selling and away from repair, I think it's like a 4 or 5 bay garage. They can correct me if I'm wrong. Somewhere in there, 4, 5, 6.
How many bays do you have currently?
I got 4 bays.
Thank you.
Yep.
So maybe shut down 2 of the bays for repair, and you could store cars, and you'd have interior storage. I mean, if that's really where you want to move the business and you really want to get out of the repair, maybe that's a solution, or at least a factor to consider.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just so the zoning board approved 4, right?
The zoning board doesn't get into licensing
I'm
numbers
sorry,
the same way they don't.
Can you repeat what you said earlier about the 4 cars?
The 4 cars are the existing Class 2 licenses for Sitco Paradise and for Four Seasons.
Right, but
So those are their Class 2 licenses.
Am I misremembering?
But the zoning board did issue a special permit in 2019 for used car sales at this property, correct?
Correct, but they
So-
did not specify a number. They said you need to get a Class 2 license to get a number.
So, how can the, well, whatever, I can't imagine the zoning board can approve a use, but then not put a number on the use. How could they possibly have known the impacts of the use? If we went ahead and said, do 250 cars, would the zoning board still say there's no impact on traffic, no detrimental effect on a neighborhood? They couldn't, I just don't, I mean, it's not you, Molly, at all. You just happen to be on the screen with me. Hi. It's not you at all.
Look at you.
It's sometimes mind numbing. And I agree completely with Jennifer Murphy's statement about this. Sean, we've got to get out of the business of people calling town hall or calling the police station and hands going like this. Either the people answering the phone don't know who the enforcement officer is, or the police station saying, well,
Peter,
that's not us, you got to talk to town hall or stuff. We just got to get out of that
I
business.
can't tell you how many
I know you're
conversations,
I know you're
this is
frustrated by it, but
direct-
we've got to.
This is direct patrol. We don't have 5,000 of these businesses in town. We have a few, and we have officers that patrol this town 24/7. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We can stop and we can check on patrol. This is something that should happen weekly, if not daily, when we're out and about. I have had these conversations with several chiefs. I do know that, this is something that we talk about, when we do kind of review these permits chronically. And it will always be a problem. We have to really get this as part of a standard operating procedure. So we will continue to reinforce this. I will come back to the board with monthly reports on statistics about enforcement.
Don't overpromise.
I know.
Please, just because, I'm just saying it, we've heard before that we're going to get monthly reports on things, so.
So
please.
I think, so I agree with everything that's been said about the enforcement issue, and I think that's a bigger issue, but I think I would be more comfortable with Molly working with Mr. De La Cruz on a plan and have some sort of sense of where the vehicles will go. I don't quite understand how moving from repair to sales reduces the number of vehicles. And so I think I'd feel more comfortable with a better sense of how that will work. Because I agree that there are multiple businesses or individuals who are parking where they shouldn't be parking. And it's not just from your business or necessarily from your business, but I'd rather see a better plan prior to approving anything. I think my understanding is, Molly, is there an ability to sell 4 vehicles now? Or can you not sell at all right now?
So he needs the Class 2 license. The zoning is there, but just in the same way a liquor, a restaurant would come to zoning board for a few things. They come for the use of the sales of liquor. They still have to get a liquor license before they can sell, if that makes sense.
Is it also true, Molly, that the prior owner did not? They were grandfathered in through some other way, and what were selling
the prior
for?
owner had a Class 2 license.
Right, but they were selling 4 cars.
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they were selling actually more than 4 cars. If you go back and look at the prior Class 2, Molly, you're going to see it's a different number.
A different number, okay.
Yeah, last year when we did the Class 2 renewals, I had asked about Silver Star because they weren't on the list last year for us, and it was because they were doing repairs, not sales, and that prior Class 2 license was a bit of a thorny issue, understandably here. So I agree with Neil, and I think people are trying to find a way to be helpful here. And so I think I would agree with Neil to ask for us to table this and continue it to, I guess, our next meeting. And ask the applicant to work with Molly and team to see if we can get some more information and come up with a plan that maybe starts with 4 cars or something that Molly can come and say, I feel comfortable that this, our staff comes back to us and says, we've looked at it, we've talked to whatever department you need to talk to. We feel comfortable that this is a workable plan, and come with something to help guide our decision-making with some additional information to help us with that.
So,
Would we also be able to do something and provide some relief for residents of Franklin Ave and Swampscott Avenue with, with resident-only parking or something of that nature that would prevent these cars from being stored on the road overnight? That would help with our enforcement.
so I
mean,
wouldn't,
No, that doesn't, I'm sorry, that doesn't help with
Well, it doesn't
enforcement.
help with enforcement.
That just creates another rule.
well, I don't
Yeah.
think it's part of licensing. That's number one, right? But,
Well, there's no reason a car without a wheel or without a tire
No, believe
should be
me,
sitting in front of
I-
Mr. McDonald's house for
I totally
any-
agree. I'm
any
just
period
saying-
of time longer than,
we can't condition his license on,
no,
You know,
understood.
But the answer is yes.
yes,
We
just
can-
not as part of.
Not as far as this, right, yeah.
Got it.
So we can,
Can I make a very quick comment?
I don't think we can right now, but we will have another hearing, because we're supposed to start a
Okay.
different public hearing at 7.
Yeah.
I apologize. If anyone objects to that decision,
It's
let me know.
Very quick.
But the only other thing I will say is, Molly, just having talked with you and getting ready for the meeting, I do feel like you had come with data and a recommendation. It's fine to postpone this, but I just don't want to is there more information? The problems that I've heard us express here aren't necessarily things, Molly, that you're going to know more about how to deal with in 2 weeks' time. So I just want to be clear, do you feel like that you have more information that we don't have, or is this, I don't know.
The only thing I'll say is that Neil's point on understanding kind of the parking layout and where things are going might be the only piece left to give you guys in regards to that.
Okay.
Obviously, in terms of, the wider enforcement question, I will discover as much as I can and bring as much of that as I'm able to the table. But that seems like it will be a broader coordination effort. But I know that the building inspector and I have definitely been talking about this and talking about how to, get to a better place.
Okay. Do we want to limit this conversation to a certain number of cars? Because otherwise it just seems like, do we want to do that, or do we want to postpone the whole thing and see what Molly, it sounds like you recommended 4, so that's why I'm wondering if we want to at least give the parameter.
Who did me?
I thought Molly had suggested.
I had recommended 4 just based on the other licenses that we have in town.
Right. So do we want to limit it to that parameter, or we don't want to take even that much right now? We'll just table it all?
And I think do we continue the hearing? Is that what we
Yeah.
do?
But it's, okay.
I think it's
I know
clear
the
that
time is
that's the
short.
direction that we're
Well, that's
heading
what I'm
in.
asking.
Yeah.
Okay, because we're not, okay. Are you clear, Molly, on what we're asking? I barely am, but I
Yes.
think I am. Okay.
I will come back with Hanley with a parking layout and an explanation of how it's going to, how he plans to downsize and focus on selling. Probably come back with some recommended conditions, although I think I gave you some draft recommendations.
Yeah.
And just maybe a brief kind of update on the enforcement process, which may require, assistance from the town administrator and you all in doing that, but.
Molly, can I just ask you also to come back to David's point, if you have recommendations about any changes to parking or roadway rules, can you come back with recommendations to us on that as well?
Okay, yep.
And then do you want the ZBA decisions?
Yeah, if we can just
If
get
we
the
could just
ZBA.
have
I mean, For
those.
example, the applicant said 22 parking spaces, but we have nothing in our materials that show 22 parking spaces or where they are or how they function, so it just helps us to have visuals to understand the property. And then if you are coming back with a recommendation about the street stuff, it may need to be an agenda item, so you just need to work with the chair. Otherwise, we're talking about something and not being able to actually really do anything about it.
Okay.
Don't complain when we're here till 10 o'clock on the 15th again.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're tabling, are we voting
No, we're doing a
to
motion to continue
continue?
to, what's our meeting?
15th.
December 15th to 6:30 PM on December 15th, you said?
Yes.
15th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thanks again, Molly. Thank you.
Thank you
So
for coming.
we'll see
Thank
you
you.
on the 15th. Thank you. Okay, thank you, FinCom and Board of Assessors, for your patience. Hang on, bear with me here for a second. Okay, so, at 7 PM, the Select Board was going to convene a joint meeting with the Board of Assessors and Finance Committee to have a public hearing pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 56, to conduct a public hearing for the purpose of discussing the various options available to the town concerning the FY 2021 classification of real and personal property according to its use and the possible adoption of local levy percentages among the various classifications. Is there a motion from the Select Board to open the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And, hi, Tim.
Hey,
Welcome,
how are you,
everybody.
Polly?
Do you need to call your meeting and do whatever you need to do?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have a quorum, so hereby we'll call the meeting to order for the FinCom.
Over to assessors.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I thought you were asking.
Tim, your audio is not great.
All right, let me check here. Hold on.
He just called his meeting to order.
Okay, they don't have to open in the same way then? It's our public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, sorry, the Chair of the Board of Assessors.
Chair is not here tonight, but Cassie is.
I'm sorry?
And is Laura in? She had the main link. I don't think she had the personal link, so she might be in. There she is. Laura.
Yep.
Okay. Tasia, do you want to call your meeting to order then?
Sure. I call the Board of Assessors meeting on December 1st to order, December 1st, 2021.
Great. All right, thanks everybody again for your patience. So I think we're going to start with Ben Straight, who is going to give us an overview, as you did, just a recap of what you did from 2 weeks ago. Thank you. Great.
Can I just ask, do members of the Finance Committee and the Board of Assessors have the information that we have in front of us? So they got it in an email? All right, so the material we're all looking at, just so you know, is the stuff that you all got via email today?
We got it about a half an hour ago.
Okay, well, you beat us by 25 minutes because we just got it 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
So can you tell us what's in it? Just joking, go.
Can you tell me who the sender was? I didn't see an email.
Laura,
Laura,
just going to forward it to you and Laura.
Thank you.
Options. So that'll be reordered a little bit just for smoothness of presentation here. So next slide. So this is a LA4 comparison, which is comparing this year's values to last year's values. Got the individual class lines on the top, and then the total is at the bottom. Residential is up a total of 10%, with single-family homes being up about 9% on average, or as a total group. The commercial properties are up 16.7%, industrial are up 15.6% in value, and personal property is up 24.4%. These value adjustments are based on the market prices for these properties. Next slide, please. We've got a little bit more breakdown here. Everybody okay if I take off my mask again?
Yes.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you very much. So this is the a chart showing commercial, industrial, and personal property since 2017 to 2022. The overall increase in those three classes combined has been 70% since 2017, with the CIP, commercial, industrial, and personal property, CIP, up 18% since 2021. You can see on this slide that all three categories have increased individually, as well as the overall total increasing significantly over the prior years. Next slide. Same breakdown here for the residential properties, the majority of which are the single-family homes in blue. Next you have condominiums in red. Green is the two families. Purple is the apartment buildings. And then the last kind of readable sliver at the top is three families in town. Those have increased 10% since 2021 as a total group, with an increase of 42% since 2017. Next slide. And these are the percentages of the overall total. The pie chart up in the right-hand corner is the breakdown of this year, or the snapshot of this year, with residential properties coming in at 92% of the overall value in Swampscott, and commercial, industrial, and personal property representing 7.62%. That has increased since last year. The graph on the left is the increases since 2017. So you can see that commercial, industrial, and personal property percentage share of the overall value in Swampscott has increased, although, of course, the residential side is still 92%. So next slide. This is the new growth amounts and values applied to the levy limit over the past 5 years, and those vary each year depending on what construction is going on, what renovations are going on in the town. Last year there was a large increase from condos going up at 71 Greenwood. Next year we're anticipating more condos, but this will fluctuate with new construction and renovation of properties in Swampscott. Next slide. This is the average values from 2017 to 2022. The left group of columns is commercial, industrial average values, and those have gone up 70% since 2017 on average. And then on the right of the chart is the single-family average values, which have increased 42% in that same time frame. In the center, you have condominiums on the left and multifamily homes on the right. Next slide. Same breakdown, but with median values. The commercial industrial median value is about a third of what the average value is. The percentage increase is roughly the same at 67% over the past 5 years, 52% for condominiums on median values, 61% for the multifamily homes, and then 38% on the median values for the single-family homes in Swampscott. Next slide. At this point, Sean will take you through comparisons with Essex County and our peer group in the state.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. So this is really a spaghetti chart here. I'm just going to call everybody's attention to the far left-hand side of the chart. You can see that blue line is the town of Swampscott's tax bill, and you can see there are just two communities that are higher than Swampscott. Back in 2012. As we go over to 2021, we can see that there are a number of other communities that now have risen higher than Swampscott. Swampscott's average single-family tax bill is coming back down into a cohort of communities throughout Essex County. Now, all these communities are very different. Essex County has 34 cities and towns, and And certainly, you know, they have different real estate values and different demographics. But it just gives you a sense of where we are with our regional peer group. So next slide. This is a chart that we've been tracking over the last 4 years, and you can see from left to right, Swampscott's average single-family tax bill from 2012 to 2021, 10 years worth of how we stack up to Essex County single-family tax bills. And you can see we have gone from a high of 45% down to where we are today at about 15% higher than Essex County communities. And so that shows you a trend that we're managing our budget and our average single-family tax bill in a way that kind of is bringing us back to an average, and that's I think been a goal that we've been striving for. Next slide. And so if we look at average single-family values over the last 10 years, you can see that our values have quite outpaced the average single-family values in Essex County. We know that Swampscott's a densely settled town, and with limited land, you know, the prices of homes certainly reflect that scarcity. So we've gone from a high of 29% higher than the average single-family valued to roughly 14% higher. Again, this is just market-driven, so we don't have a lot of influence on that other than, you know, we know that real estate is really becoming very expensive throughout the region. And so the next slide is just a table that shows the 10 years worth of variance between Essex County average single-family tax bill and assessed valuations and Swampscott. And so we go from a high of $2,600 variance down to a low of where we are today of $1,184. And so you think about 10 years of tax payments of a variance of $2,600, that's $26,000. And so getting that down to $1,100, that's $11,000. It's a significant change. And when we think about a quality of life, those are meaningful ways to kind of look at efforts to just, you know, become more fiscally balanced. And next slide. This is a practice that we've really looked at peer communities. We want to kind of think about where, instead of just our regional counterparts, where can we look to other communities that have similar real estate, similar commercial, residential real estate. You know, we're heavily residential, and you know, we came up with a peer group of communities: Rockport, Middleton, Hamilton, Winthrop, Ipswich, Georgetown, Hull, Newburyport, Situate, North Reading. We had a longer list, but this is really a list that we've tried to benchmark against because these communities seem to have a little more in common. So go to the next slide. This shows our historical trend against our average assessed value. You know, Swampscott has been up and down, but we went from a high of 21% higher than our peer group in assessed value to a low of 6% in 2017, and this year we were about 10%. And so that's just assessed valuation, market-driven, but it gives you a sense. Swampscott still has properties that are valued a little higher than even those peer communities. Next is the average single-family tax bill. So if we go to the next slide, this shows a 10-year variance between this peer group of smaller communities with similar demographics and similar real estate portfolios to Swampscott. So we can see we went from a high of 47% higher than the average of our peer group down to a low of 12% higher than our peer group. So we really have done a significant amount of work over the last 10 years to try to bring that variance tighter to the average. So next slide. Similar table. This puts all that data into a table, and you can see the average single-family assessed value in the peer group and the variance between Swampscott, and we go from a high of $2,600 to a low of $948 this year, as a reflection of some of the efforts that we've made to try to tighten the belt and strike that balance in Swampscott. And so, next slide. So this is a composite of the state family tax bill. This is a state average over the last 10 years. So over the last 10 years, throughout the Commonwealth, we've seen about a 35% increase in the average single-family tax bill. When we looked at this same data for Swampscott over the last 10 years, we've seen a 7.5% increase. So over the last 10 years, in particular over the last 5 years, we've really established a practice of keeping Swampscott's budget tighter. When we look at our rank in the Commonwealth, we've gone from having the 23rd highest average single-family tax bill to the 42nd highest average single-family tax bill. Now, it may not seem like a dramatic improvement, but it certainly reflects progress where we're really seeking to strike a balance. So, next slide. And so now we're going to turn to commercial and industrial values, and quite the opposite trajectory. You know, we've gone from a low of 17% of comparison to Essex County to a high this year of 56%. Our commercial properties are getting more and more valuable, and that's, I think, in some ways a positive reflection of the market. We want to see our commercial properties be valuable. We want them to reflect a healthy and robust economy. When we look at the average commercial industrial tax bill, we've gone from a low of 61% in 2017 or 58% in 2018 to a high of 89% this year. We're seeing those increased valuations really generate additional tax revenue for commercial and industrial. And so, next slide. This shows the table of the data that compares Swampscott commercial industrial to Essex County, and you can see this one's a variance of a low of 14,300 or 14,071 to a high of 19,708. And so this again reflects a stronger commercial sector. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Ben, and Patrick will take us through how we compile the information to set the tax rate with Department of Revenue. So, next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so we have tax policy options here. These are 5 major levers we have to influence tax policy. So
Patrick, if you want to take your mask off.
Oh, I'm sorry. So setting the town budget, estimating local receipts, electing to do a small business exemption or a residential exemption, which Ben will talk about later, transferring from free cash or reserves to mitigate the tax increase, and splitting the tax rate, which Ben will get to later. So next slide, Ally. Okay, so this is a table of all the appropriations that were made since we last set the tax rate. Total appropriations is approximately $71 million, and I'm going to walk through how those are funded. In addition to the appropriations that are voted, we have state charges that we have to fund. This is part of what the state calls the cherry sheet, and this is set each fiscal year. Our largest item on state charges is education-related, we have about $1.1 million in education-related charges. Total cherry sheet charges are $1.493 million for this fiscal year. Total revenue to be raised, we have $71 million in appropriations. We have a $31,000 cherry sheet offset, which represents state aid to our public library. And we also have an allowance for abatements and exemptions that gets added into the total amount of tax revenue that we have, total amount of revenue we have to raise for the year, which is $72.7 million for fiscal '22. To fund that, we have state aid totaling $6.2 million, $4.7 million of which relates to education. And this is up $63,000 from last fiscal year. Next, we have local receipts totaling $4.6 million estimated for fiscal '22. There's several different categories on here, the largest being motor vehicle excise tax, meals tax, interest and fees on delinquent bills. New this year, we have cannabis excise and impact fees, and we have our solid waste fees that are resulting from our new waste reduction program. We also have various departmental revenues and building permits that all add up to this total for the fiscal year. Next slide. Okay, so this page here summarizes the total revenue to be raised that we just walked through. Added in here is the estimated water and sewer enterprise fund receipts as well, because those were factored into the appropriations we saw at the beginning. And this all works out to our total tax levy, total gross tax levy of $52,660,000, which is 74.2% of the total appropriations made by town meeting. Next slide. Okay, and this is just a recap of how free cash was used last year. Our prior year free cash certification was $4.7 million, $1.55 million of which was used to reduce the tax rate, and then $966,000 of which was used for other uses, which I'll detail on the next slide. And I have for reference at the bottom here the 3 to 5% guideline. Our financial policies prescribe that we maintain 3 to 5% of our operating budget in free cash for the unforeseen. Next slide. Here we have just a more detailed breakout of how free cash was used last year. The $966,417 of free cash used for other uses I mentioned before included $500,000 transfer to capital stabilization, $250,000 to the OPEB trust, $157,000 for collective bargaining agreements last year, and a capital item and a smaller transfer to the Conservation Commission trust. Next slide. Okay. Considering free cash this year, our current estimate is $4.15 million for free cash. Anticipated uses, an amount to offset the tax levy. Here I put $1.55 million. $250,000 to general stabilization, $125,000 to capital and OPEB, and $120,000 estimated for collective bargaining agreements. Free cash has also historically been used for funding for certain capital or for unforeseen and emergent operating costs. These uses up top will keep our range within the 3 to 5% of our operating budget. $1.98 million would be the remaining from our estimated free cash certification for this fiscal year if we use these estimated appropriations. Next slide. This is a snapshot of what our 10-year financial forecast looks like. We're constantly updating this to react to changes in the budget, changes in revenue estimates. So this has been updated. This includes estimated debt service for the new school, estimated uses of free cash. You can see in the yellow here we've estimated free cash in future fiscal years. It's tapering off because there was an interest in reducing the use of free cash to offset the tax rate in future years. So that's reflected on here. So
Can I interject for a second and ask a question, please? Can just either Patrick or Sean, please contextualize what this 10-year forecast is? We just went through several months of residents viewing a prior 10-year forecast.
Sure.
And characterizing it as something that it's not.
That's right.
And so please just explain why is it that our expense growth, for example, is higher in your forecast than it is in our past, if you
That's
will.
right.
So why are you assuming very conservative assumptions and showing significant deficits? Because I think it's really important that people understand what this
Absolutely.
is.
So I actually would not advise that we actually show a financial forecast during a tax classification, but I've been asked to present some of this information because we want to talk about free cash. And so it's important to understand that this is a planning tool, not a financial, it's not a really empirical budgeting tool. It's used to help us kind of prognosticate and say, hey, our past behavior will in some way determine our future behavior. We have 10 years worth of actual expenditures, 10 years worth of actual revenue. And so this data is empirically sound, but our behaviors change from year to year. And while we project some information, the world's always changing, and the town's budget is always evolving, and contracts are always being negotiated and renewed, and it becomes very difficult to use this as a financial tool as opposed to just a planning tool. Our tax classification typically is all about, our actual numbers and, that real solid empirical data. This is, it has history that's solid, but the future is very uncertain and built on assumptions. And most of those assumptions have changed dramatically over the last 4 years. And so we've weighted the way we forecast empirically in this forecast to help balance that sense that we're not looking at our recent behavior in a greater context. With that, I think we have a slide that's coming up that describes this not in that many words.
Yep. So just to recap kind of what Sean was getting at, there are different assumptions that go into this model that are informed by history. So when we're looking forward in future years, it's not necessarily, it's what we might be able to expect based on what we've experienced, but things change. So when we do our budget, there's lots of different considerations to put in that will create, perhaps dramatic variances from what you see here in the forecast years out. And, through conservative budgeting and spending and, different economic growth and local receipts and, changes in fees over time and using reserves strategically, we can kind of, we can have a better outlook each year compared to the forecast is our goal. So, next slide. This slide just provides an overview of historically the last 5 or 6 fiscal years of reserve fund balances for our General Stabilization Fund, Capital Stabilization Fund, and OPEB Trust. And I've also included the free cash certifications historically, including this year's estimate, just for a reference.
So the residential exemption is the exempting up to 35% of the owner-occupied residential property values. And that exemption is paid for by shifting the tax burden onto the non-owner occupied and higher value residential properties. Next slide. So this is using 2021 numbers. The residential tax rate, if it had been adopted last year, would have been 1979 versus the 1380. The break-even point would have been the $683,849 mark as far as the value of the home. So anybody below that mark would have seen a bill reduction, and anybody above that mark would have seen an increase to their bill. And next slide, please. This is the number of properties that would have been affected. On the plus side, on the homes below that mark, 4,000 homes would have seen a benefit and had a reduction in, on average, the numbers across the top in green there to their tax bills. 170 single-family, two-families, and condo units would basically break even, 178 that is. 73 of those would have actually seen slight increases ranging from $1 to $118 across the year. So while they're essentially breaking even, there still would have been some additional costs to some of those homes. On the higher end, 833 single-family residences would have seen a significant cost added to their tax bills. These are the averages of the values at the bottom, which are a little bit hard to read, I apologize. But any home over the $2 million mark, which is that column all the way to the right, would have seen an average increase of $11,839. Within that group, there's 24 single-family homes that would have seen over a $12,000 increase to their tax bills based on this residential exemption. And there's one home that would have seen a $38,000 increase, multiple homes over $20,000 increase to their annual tax bills. These are single-family owner-occupied homes that would have seen those increases. Next slide. Oh, so the recommendation on that would be to not adopt that provision in Swampscott. Next slide. Thank you. So the small commercial exemption, this was exempting up to 10% of the value of the commercial property that houses a small business who qualifies, having less than 10 employees on average on average over the course of a year, and where the commercial assessed value of that property is less than $1 million. Next slide. So the questions were asked I'm sorry. So these are the 27 potentially eligible parcels. The same process on the residential side. You would shift the tax burden over to the rest of the class and increase the tax rate on the other commercial and industrial properties to cover the exemptions on the eligible properties here. Next slide. So last meeting, there were questions asked about, are the small businesses aware of this exemption? Have they been using this exemption for the community benefit? Are the exemptions actually passing on to the small business that occupies the properties? And what are the other impacts of this policy? So I went around to the 27 potentially eligible properties. Of those, this was on a Monday on Thanksgiving week, so I had pretty good respondent percentage, but there were some that were closed, some that did not return the survey on time. But out of the 15 people who were basically available and responded, none of them were familiar with the exemption. 2 of them had vaguely heard of it in the past, but weren't really sure about what it was. And of those respondents, 7 of those were the property owners as well as the business owner, and 8 of them were the tenants. The property owners, because they're on the list this year, doesn't mean that they got it last year, but if they had been eligible last year and received the exemption, they would have benefited whether they knew it or not. The 8 tenants, of the 8 tenants, 6 of those pay a rental amount that would include any taxes, so they don't pay a separate rental amount to the landlord. And then 2 tenants pay the exact tax amount to the landlord, although one of them said he never actually checks that amount, but no reason to think that it's anything but straightforward. So 2 of those tenants pay the exact tax amount. 6 of them, they're just paying a rent amount that would include any taxes. And the other concern is that other commercial properties that house small businesses that would otherwise qualify would not receive this exemption if they also house a business that doesn't qualify, or if their value is over $1 million. So if you happen to be a small business and you're in a building that's worth more than $1 million, you would not qualify for this, or the building, the property would not qualify for this, and your tax rate would be increased to offset the exemption for the other properties. So there would be a negative impact on those small businesses. So the recommendation for this year would be to not adopt the small commercial exemption, and perhaps if the board wanted to do some more research in the coming year. Next slide, please. So this is a small commercial exemption and who pays for it, and the breakdown of the additional cost to the property based on values. Next slide. Okay, so this is the calculation of a single tax rate, and taking the overall tax levy with no allocation of free cash of $52,660,560, dividing by total value in Swampscott of the $3.77 billion, multiplying that by 1,000, and getting the tax rate, the single tax rate of $13.96 per $1,000 in assessed value. This would increase the median and average tax bills on single-family homes by over 10% each median and average. So the residential percentage of value is 92.3766%, and the total commercial, industrial, and personal property total percentage share is 7.6234%. Next slide, please. So that's important when you are shifting the tax rate, which is increasing the burden on the commercial, industrial, and personal property side to more than what their natural percentage of the overall assessed value in the town is. So the shift on the right here in the pie chart would be a 170% shift. Swampscott is limited to doing 170% shift, which is actually 170.311% shift to the commercial side this year, because the commercial, industrial, and personal property percentage increased, and because we cannot go we cannot go below the floor established by the DOR, which is 87.0165% for the residential share of the levy. That's the historical low that has been paid by the residential side since classification began. So a shift of 170.311% this year would match that historical low for the percentage of levy paid by the residential properties. Next slide, please. So this is last year's tax rate recap. There was a 170% CIP shift and a transfer of $1.55 million. That made the average single-family tax bill $8,999. The median tax bill $74.73. Average condo and median condo $55.08 and $43.72 respectively. This last year's shift to the commercial side made the residential percentage of the levy that was paid 87.8596%, which you'll note is higher than the 87.0165% that the 170% shift this year would put on the residential side. Next slide, please. So this year's recommendation is to shift that one 170% over to the CIP, and also transfer free cash in the amount of $1.55 million. That would make the average single tax bill increase by $79 to $9,078, and the median tax bill increase $53 to $75.26. And the average condo and median condo tax bills tick down ever so slightly to $45.95 and $43.65 respectively. That would make the residential percentage share, as I mentioned, 87.0165%, equal to the historical low. Next slide, please. So this is a big table, but it's a few additional options to what was presented last week. It's broken down in the next few slides, but highlighted in blue is the recommended allocation of $1.55 million and the 1.7 shift, and the effects on the average and median tax bills, both on the residential and commercial sides. Next slide, please. With no free cash and no shift, you would have line 1 here, which would increase the average tax bill $933 or 10.4%, or the median tax bill $761 or 10.2%. And then you have the other potential free cash amounts and the resulting value or bill increases to the right. In the no shift option, obviously the commercial tax bills would go down significantly. Next slide. This is the 1.65 shift and the various options there and the effects of those options. Next slide, please. And the 170% shift here with the highlighted recommendations. So we can come back to those slides if you want to discuss those. Next slide. This is the excess levy capacity. This is the amount that could be legally levied to the town and collected. There is an excess this year, assuming that 1.55 million shift, there's an excess levy capacity of $6,076,939, with that actual levy being $51,110,560. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So this is a single-family average tax bill history in Swampscott over the past 10 years. This is assuming that 1.55 million free cash allocation in the last data points for an increase of that $80 on the average single-family bill and $53 on the median single-family bill. Allocating $2 million from free cash would level out that average tax bill, and that line would just go across. There'd actually be a $1 increase to the average single-family tax bill. Next slide, please. This is those single-family tax bills in comparison with the values and the value increases over the same time period, 10 years. While values have continued to increase significantly, the tax bills have been offset by budgeting and free cash allocations over the past 6 years there. Using that 1.55 million in free cash would increase the average tax bill less than 1%. And then the other allocations at the bottom would increase the tax bill. With no free cash, the average tax bill would go up 4%, $750,000, 2.5%, and so on down to the 2 million, which would level out that tax bill for an increase of 0.01% or that $1. Next slide, please. So these are the potential motions that could happen tonight, which is the motion to adopt that minimum residential factor for the shift of 170.311% for the fiscal year of 22, and to not adopt the residential exemption and not adopt the small commercial exemption. And with that, and then of course the special town meeting has to occur for that allocation of free cash. And so I'll open up to questions and any discussion.
It's really helpful, Ben, thank you, and Patrick. FinCom, and this is your first time joining for the presentation, so I want to give you guys a chance to ask away.
This is Eric Hartman, if you guys can hear me. I just had a couple of questions from the slide. So when I forget which slide it was, but when we were talking about using the 1.55 million of free cash, and it kept us within our policy guideline of 3 to 5%. Can someone just reference the budget number that we're comparing that against, so we can, know how much, where we really would be, what is the percentage? I know it's between the range, but what's the true percentage? And then similarly, if we decided to use 2 million of free cash, where would we be? Like what % of the total budget?
I had you that first question, Eric, so thanks for asking.
I think it's probably in the slide deck somewhere. I'm just not sure which number to look at.
Well, Patrick, it was, well, it's like slide 32 is where you talked about being within the range. I think the question is, where would we be in the range?
Yep.
The 3% floor is $1,932,181. And if we use the $1.55 million that we discussed, that would leave $1,980,000.
Can you just repeat that? Because I was like, just.
That's okay.
Didn't go
Yeah.
in my brain right. Thanks.
Yep, so if we apply $1.55 million to offset the tax levy, and we use these other assumed appropriations for the rest of the fiscal year, the remaining estimated from our certification is going to be $1,980,000.
But what's the
Yeah, the
floor?
first one.
What's
The
the 3%
floor is, it's on the other slide, $1,932,181. So it gets you right there.
So Patrick, can I take that number and divide by 3% and get the budget that
Yes.
you're multiplying it by?
Yep, correct.
64.4 million, okay. Another question was on the 170% shift. It seems like we're recommending we do the same thing that we did last year, which was also 170. I guess I don't have any context. Is that something we do every year? Has that been a regular practice? I just don't know the history there.
It has been something that we've done over the last few years. It was as high as 175, I think, 4 years ago. In the last few years, we've been at 170.
Eric, I would point out that I think the most, a further very important fact, though, is that this year, we couldn't do 175 if we
Correct.
wanted to.
Yeah.
Right.
Under DOR guidelines, we are now capped at the 170.31 or 13, whatever the number is.
Right.
And so that, one question that we've asked is to better understand the behavior, assessment behavior that causes a further decrease in the cap so that we can anticipate that and understand fully what those decreases in the cap, because it's not all necessarily bad news, because your residential base is increasing. Sorry, your commercial base is increasing. And so you make up some of that, but it just, to understand it, we were trying to get ahead of this by 4 years ago, reducing it from 175 to 17, which was the first time I think ever we did that. And so, you know, the question is, at some point, is there a further reduction that we do to, again, stay ahead of this so it doesn't push us somewhere involuntarily?
I think what's really helpful is that the town has some financial tools in its toolbox, and we have to continue to be mindful about, you know, what our free cash levels are and what our stabilization levels are, because as we see our efforts of you know, really increasing community and economic development, it is putting pressure on this split. And so, you know, it's not all bad news, but certainly we don't want to see a dramatic shift to the residential without having some ability to mitigate that, as the markets do change, and they change in ways that are different from each other. The residential doesn't move at the same rate as commercial, and you know, one of the things that we didn't talk about, that we talked about as we put this presentation together, is if you step back 10 years ago, every one of the bar charts would look the same, but they'd be inverse. They'd all be going down at, you know, in that same proportion. It was a dramatically different economy, and we had dramatically different experiences. And so times will change. Right now, we're seeing some very positive, you know, information about real estate trends in Swampscott and budget trends, but we've got to be mindful that, you know, that won't always be the case.
So can somebody walk me through what getting ahead of it would look like? So the shift like, for example, in either direction, I see here the 165, I guess, but, so if something shifted to, I'm just trying to, if we can use a concrete example for that, it'd help with numbers in my.
Yeah, so the shift is really a result of the commercial CIP, the commercial industrial personal property, percentage of the overall share of value increasing. So that shift then gets limited because we can't go below that 87% floor on the residential percentage side. Kind of one of the good ways that it was explained in the past that I thought was helpful is that's somewhat of a self-leveling equation. So as the CIP shifts upwards, that burden is already shifted over to them just naturally because their values have increased, and it's shifted away from the residential for the same reason. So if the commercial continues to increase, the shift would be limited potentially further, but that burden would already have shifted to the commercial side. If the commercial side goes over 13% of total value on its own just naturally, then that would then decrease that floor that is the DOR's limitation. So there is in your packets
a negative impact would start at.
There's no real negative impact.
When would it not, is there an example when it would not self-level then?
Floor would go down from
Right.
87% to 85%.
Right.
Right, yeah, so that floor, so as long as commercial is increasing, that's a positive impact on the residential side. And so I did include in your package, I apologize, I don't think it was emailed around, but there is a calculation of that shift. It's, good bedtime reading if you're, feeling energetic and you want to get yourself worn out. You can read this a few times, and that should do the trick. But essentially, as that commercial value increases, the shift gets limited, but the burden has already been shifted over to the commercial side.
Okay.
So there's the I guess the negative situation, which you can then shift more, but the negative situation would be if the commercial side was actually going down in percentage to too small of a percentage where it wouldn't matter if you shifted 175% of the burden because the residential side would equal too much value. Right. But none of those things are going to really happen. The commercial seems to be outpacing the residential at this point, but like Sean said, that changes
years ago.
Based on the market. Right, not the case, in 2008.
So, but what are we getting ahead of then? I guess that's where I'm sorry,
You mean if we didn't shift 170 and if we shifted 165, like how does
I don't know, Peter and Sean were kind of describing worrying about it and getting ahead of it, but I'm not quite understanding what, with what you just said, what getting ahead of it.
I don't know if that was like basically overall discussion of budget and free cash allocations and
so many people in here.
Ahead of, just planning ahead for that, or if it's.
Yeah, I was speaking about macro financing, like when you show up for classification, we look at our financial tools and we look at what's happening with the average single family or the median single family tax bill and what are the influences, whether it's the split or whether it's changes in, the annual budget or revenue position. We can use these financial tools to stabilize the levy. And we talked about that, with how we modeled the debt service for the school. These are our opportunities that few communities have that Swampscott has worked hard to put in place.
Mm-hmm. Jill?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it's, I was the chair of the board when the first year we didn't do the 175, and the part that's getting missed a little bit is that a lot of some communities are a single rate, which is helps businesses want to be in that community. So the other part of it is business development. So we keep focusing on the balance and the control of the single family tax bill, which I've been around for 25 years, so believe me, I understand the importance of that. But the other part is just the business development part. So, you're shifting as much as you possibly can, a business could look at that and say, I'm going to go to another community. That's all I wanted to say.
Right.
And can I just add to what Jill said? This is Tasia. That is incredibly important when you're looking at that ratio that allows us to have the split. So in our last meeting, we discussed that that ratio is so tight right now, and we keep adding residential value. We keep adding residential properties to town, but we're losing commercial properties, and that's putting us in a really precarious position. So, you know, I just wanted to echo the business development piece of that is so critically important.
Thanks, Tasia. Other FinCom members have questions, concerns, thoughts? Okay. Board members.
I remember what?
I would appreciate a little bit more clarity on our reliance on free cash, to understand that how much the cumulative impact of recent years' use of free cash to offset levy, how hooked we are on the use of the free cash, such that if we get to a point in time where we can't do $1.55 million or $2 million or $1 million, what that impact would be. And I think your 10-year budget kind of foreshadows some things, right? Which is it foreshadows I guess I would say a spike in tax growth in the immediate years that we can't maintain this. And so I guess that I'm interested in understanding the thought process from the financial team on this, because I appreciate the desire to continue to lower taxes and to get us to be, you know, a more and more affordable community for sure. But I used the analogy last time to our water and sewer rates, right? For years we kept on saying, look how low our water and sewer rates are, and we said that as a positive, right? But now we have a reckoning with that, which is we underinvested, right? We didn't do the things we needed to do in water and sewer for generations. This is not a current problem. This is a generational problem. And now we're having to accelerate those rates, and people have sticker shock, right? They're saying, what do you mean it's a double digit? But for us using retained earnings, we would have been a very significant double digit, right, increase in water and sewer rates this year. And so increases, we want to minimize them, but we've been sustaining a long period of no increases. And at some point, you know, the free cash thing gets too big of a beast for us to continue feeding every year. So I'm just wondering, like, where you all think we are, and how do we prevent that problem from happening?
Peter, I appreciate that, and we've talked long and hard about when is the right time to strike that balance. You know, using free cash to adjust the levy is it's not generally what you want to have to rely on. You want a balanced budget that grows incrementally. But for generations, Swampscott has had a real pressure on its average single-family tax bill, or the median single-family tax bill, and that's demonstrated through the analysis that we've presented. And so as we've looked at, you know, our financial position, we've modeled, you know, a tapering off of free cash. Just like the financial forecast, you know, showed deficits, that's going to be our challenge over the next couple of years, to try to figure out how do we grow local receipts, how do we manage budget in ways that help ensure that we don't just simply pass that significant increase to Swampscott taxpayers. You know, the town's got, as we've gotten better at budgeting, we'll have less free cash. We had $6 million in free cash a few years ago, and now it's really tightened up right around $4 million. And again, we're estimating the 4.1. It's not certified yet, and so it could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but we feel comfortable that 4.1 is going to be sound. And so we're going to have to continue to be careful and tether off that free cash. We've looked at dropping that use, you know, from 1.5 to 1.2 to 800 to 400,000 over the next few years, and as we ramp up strategic use of stabilization. We put these funds aside specifically for these purposes, though. We wanted to make sure that we could stabilize the impact to the taxpayers. By having financial reserves, it puts us in a position to have these types of strategic discussions about how we place the burden on Swampscott taxpayers. We know that they pay one of the highest burdens in the Commonwealth for local taxes, and we've tried to always be mindful at this time of year how we shift those burdens. That said, there's no magic wand. There's a list of projects that continue to grow. We've got a new school that we need to build. We have infrastructure that we have discussed that we're still grappling to get a hold of. All of those challenges will always be true. We'll always have more projects than we can possibly deal with, but most of the bigger projects that we have are actually marbleized within our budget. That's where we lost sight of a lot of our financial responsibilities that we can control. And when I think about the issues that we face over the next couple of years, I think about specific lines in the town budget that are higher than peer communities, that are higher than where we need them to be to help sustain our annual operating burdens.
So let me just, a couple quick responses. So our free cash increases have been slowing in recent years, meaning our refilling of free cash has not been as robust in recent years, and I think that's a byproduct of the fact that we have more integrity in our budgeting process, meaning that you and the financial team have gotten the budget assumptions tighter, right? They can't ever be so tight that we have a deficit, right? But tighter, whereas in a prior life and prior people running things, the assumptions were not nearly as tight. But that's just a new reality for us if we want to keep this budgeting functioning, is that we're going to have less free cash because we are being truer to the actual budget, right? We're raising revenue truer to the actual budget. And so just to be aware of that. And I just think as though it comes to a point when you're looking, there is a slide 52 of Ben's presentation, which is the free cash options, the 170% shift, I think just throws out the percentages, if you will, year to year differential, depending on how much free cash we use at the 1/7 split. And the question is there a number where we say, I want to talk about commercial because I think it matters, but staying on residential right now, and this is single family residential, is there a percentage increase per year? And again, I despise that we're using average. I'm just going to say this again. I think it's great when we have to compare to state stuff because that's how the state compares stuff, but we're talking about Swampscott here, so using average again is not the right vehicle for us because our average is so far off from our median. But anyways, using average, because that's what's in front of us here.
You have both.
Do we have both? Yeah. Sorry, we do have both. Never mind, I'm going to use median. So using median, thank you. Using the median then, which is the right three columns, thank you, David, is a 0.71% tax increase for a median single-family bill an unreasonable thing for people to understand and to expect, even in a community that historically has been high? Or is a 1.82% okay? Or is a 2.29% okay to set expectations for people that is just realistically kind of the growth that has to happen? Because the reality is, Sean, your growth, you've said in previous conversations with us that our budget expenses can't continue on the town side, never mind the school, put the school aside. The town side's been anemic, right? Because you've needed it to be anemic to balance, right? We've been less than half of whatever the school increase has been, and I think we've been under 1%, right, over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's not sustainable, even after, because at some point you're going to run out of fat in the budget, if you will, or things that you can carve down that then you have to then say, how do I pay for those 2% COLAs and those 3% COLAs or whatever, all these things that happen here. And it just feels like we're getting close to a time where I feel like we should be creating a discipline that decreases reliance on free cash on this. So anyways, if you look at commercial, we're not talking about 0.71%. We're talking about 12 and 13% increases. And that's values went up disproportionately to residential this year. But that's also a pretty big hit. And
Pretty big hit, but it also reflects the market. And again, I look at that and I think that's healthy, and that shows a strong commercial strength in the market. I get the points though, Peter, and I think it really is, look, it has been a very difficult challenge to come in and try to restructure budgets and to restructure how we build Swampscott's financial position to think short-term and long-term. Like, we've got long-term financial tools here that the board can think about from a policy perspective. I still go back to that peer community analysis and just being a little bit higher than the average. And I was thinking, you know, should we get to the average and then you know, try to continue to, you know, be careful about how we manage the burden that we place on our taxpayers. We know that we have a lot of seniors. We know that we have a lot of folks that are you know, paycheck to paycheck, dealing with the financial realities of living in a town that has one of the highest tax burdens in the Commonwealth. And I do think that these are the times where we try to strike that balance.
So I guess to the chair, I'm interested, because tonight we have to vote. The select board needs to vote tonight or before December 13th. And it will require a free cash warrant article, which then gives the FinCom a formal role in recommending free cash, right? And so there's some codependence there. So I'm interested in FinCom's initial reaction about free cash, if you're okay with that, to hear, if people are willing to share, to kind of feed our thought process, because our tax rate setting is going to be predicated upon how much free cash we're also going to recommend. We can't disassociate those two things.
I'm happy to chime in and start with my thoughts and then open it up for the rest of the Finance Committee as well. But, you know, I think the issues you're discussing on the longer term reliance on free cash are ones that we need to continue to have dialogue about. I think with a very short term view, you know, the fact that we stay within the financial guidelines with the 1.55 is helpful. And it is generally, you know, a positive guidance for us. I think, you know, it gets us with the other uses of free cash that have been mentioned or that are anticipated for later in the year. It does get us down to the sort of closer to the lower end of those guidelines. So I do think, you know, if anything, the 2 million wouldn't something I would support. The 1.55, for the reasons I stated, I would support. I think the other thing I would just state is we need to keep in mind, you know, what we are going to be doing over the next, you know, decade, also with the use of stabilization funds, which we talked about in connection with the school project. Have those stabilization funds. But I think that will also be part of those longer term discussions on how do you use free cash and what is the impact of that plan that we have in place to leverage the excess stabilization funds over the next decade. So shorter answer is in the short term, because the free cash would stay within the financial guidelines, I have a level of comfort with the 1.55. I'd be interested to hear other perspectives from FinCom.
So this is Mary Ellen. And I agree with what Tim said. Originally, I was more inclined to go 175, 2 million. But after looking at the presentation again tonight, I think the 155 is definitely the way to go. And I think looking further into the future and just tweaking it a little bit more, we can get a little bit tighter later on. But for right now, I think the 155 is the way to go.
This is Cinder. I feel the same way, just to weigh in. I like the presentation. It was very thorough. Thank you.
Jill, I agree. I mean, I'm okay with the 155. I certainly wouldn't go any higher. But I just want to reiterate what Peter said, which is that to me, the notion of like reliance on free cash is a little bit of a straw man argument, because if the closer we get to budgeting properly, the less we'll need. I mean, it's money we've already taxed. We're just returning it. So to me, Peter, I would love to see going forward some sort of analysis, or not analysis, but even maybe financial guideline of a target tax increase per year without extraordinary events like pandemics or, whatever. And try to budget for it, as opposed to like this kind of overtax and give back. I mean, that's why it feels weird. It feels expensive, but it isn't. So I would love to see us think about that differently.
Sorry, does anyone else on FinCom want to say anything before I do? Okay. So I guess one thought, Sean, that I'm wondering is I guess the end of the year consideration that Tim was mentioning. I think we touched on this the last meeting, but I'm wondering if it makes sense, just putting it out there. Let's just say, for example, if we applied a $1 million from the slides, like 51 and 2, pages 51 and 2, the 1.7 shift for this one, and then a $1 million, and then applied some of that other, so school's going to hit in FY24, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So even if we ultimately got to, so putting more towards stabilization, again, towards Tim's point, or reducing it now this year, but then keeping it the same next year, as opposed to lowering it starting next year. It seems like that's like a double, it's just hitting double. So those are two thoughts.
Well, Polly, can I just jump in? I wasn't necessarily suggesting that we increase the contribution of free cash to stabilization, because I think what's anticipated here, I believe, I need to look back, but I believe it's in line with what was projected in those discussions around the school. So I just want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we increase the free cash to stabilization this year. I'm just saying that the longer term discussion around free cash, we just need to keep in mind that we are looking to do some kind of fairly unique things over the next decade.
Yeah, sorry. I did understand that. Thank you for clarifying, because I wasn't making that clear. So, but to that point, that as one option, considering what's left at the end of the year, if we apply the higher number, and then also with the consideration of the school hitting in the next cycle, not reducing it that year, because I think you're suggesting, with this forecast, and I know you don't want to use the forecast as a budgeting tool.
I don't, but we, prognostications here, we start with $1 million in '24 to offset the debt service in the school, and that drops off precipitously over the next 10 years. And so, there is going to be opportunity to kind of think about as we wean the town off of free cash in terms of how we stabilize the tax levy. We can take some of that free cash and seed stabilization, or seed, some of the capital stabilization, and continue to really think carefully and strategically about, you know, how we balance the needs of the town. This is, you know, this is the macro financing that we're developing as institutional memory. And it follows a policy, but it also, you know, in practice, I think, will be supported by, you know, looking at this 10-year forecast and thinking carefully about how we plan.
So in terms of why it might not make sense, and it might not make any sense, but I'm just wondering, if we're lowering it, it doesn't seem like it's a much, what is the amount difference for us? It is actually quite a bit, but it's still.
It's a really great conversation, Polly. I just think, given the fact that, you know, we have a little bit of a careful dynamic here with trying to mitigate the increase of the average single-family or median family tax bill.
But it would lower it next year. It would help.
It would stabilize it next year. Next year, the economy could change dramatically. We could see a dramatic change in commercial and residential, you know, and so there's still a degree of prognostication. And I think right now, we, you know, the market's already dropped to 1.7. We were at 1.7. I think we can.
Well, the 1.7 I'm not touching for this example, right? I'm just, anyway. But I'm just going to keep going here. It's an important decision. So with respect to the 1.65%, just in terms of, Peter, what you were saying with the hit to the commercial at 1.7%. At the 1.65%, it seems not much more to residential. I'm just trying to compare the two at the same time. But a bigger savings to commercial. But I understand that's probably jumping the gun. I'm just surprised by how much that shift in percentage actually
saves.
Yeah, the commercial, compared to how much it impacts residential, so. But I don't feel like, I'm not sensing that that's on the table. But anyway, that's all, those are my thoughts.
Well, again, I just, and this is, I'm going to speak Ben's world here a little bit for a second here. The commercial has to at some point be on our table, which I appreciate that commercial values from an assessment practice outpaced residential values this year, and I appreciate that. And that, so no one should be fooled to think we have more commercial parcels. We don't, right? We have less commercial parcels, just greater value, right? But the truth is, at 10, 15% tax growth to a tenant, if it's passed through to a tenant, that is only going to decrease rent. It doesn't, if you will, right? There's not an infinite amount that a tenant's going to pay. So landlords ultimately have to adjust it to say, I can't pass through a 15% because those tenants are going to say, no way, right? I can't afford that. And so the only thing that the landlord can do is adjust rent. And when you adjust rent, you start playing with values, right? And you could potentially, now that's the long play, right? But the reality is, if you're doing 10 and 15% growth on taxes, this is going to happen, right? I mean, just because we're already at the top. We're not even talking about, I appreciate we talk about single family. We don't talk about commercial. We're already at the top on commercial, right? So I'm just, at some point, I don't know, I don't have a clue what the solution is, right? I'm not even pretending that.
I would say that certainly landlords will pass along, certainly landlords will pass along tax increases, but they also typically are charging the maximum rent that the market will bear as a practice as well. There's some managerial decisions, right? You might have a good tenant and you'll charge them a little bit less or something like that, but it's also market driven on what they can charge, and so you're right. That either eats into their profit margins or it gets passed on.
Every tenant looks at their all-in cost, right? They don't care about their actual rent number. It's the all-in cost, right? I'll pay a lot of rent if I don't have to pay a lot of real estate taxes, and conversely, I'll pay a little rent if I have to pay a lot of real estate taxes, right? And so there's not an infinite market. The reality is, at some point, those tenants say, I can't afford Swampscott. I've got to go across the line, literally 50 feet in Vinton Square, to a different shopping center because that's $5 a foot cheaper,
Yeah,
just on real estate taxes. And I'm making up that number, but that's a big number for.
but it is also 5 feet.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just that, again, that is not on the table because I don't think we have a solution. It would be great to have a solution. We don't even have a tool yet to even address that, to be honest with you. We got to build a skyscraper in the quarry.
I think, we talked a few years ago about creating, a community and economic development department and really thinking about how do we really grow commercial, and how do we think about, what's the future of Vinnon Square? What's the future of Humphrey Street? What's the future of the MBTA station and neighborhood? And how do we make the most out of the commercial property that we have? And again, from my perspective, it's encouraging to see some commercial growth in valuations. We do have to be mindful of how that's going to affect the small business development in Swampscott. We still see some small businesses thriving in Swampscott, but it's arguably a lot more challenging in Swampscott than over a municipal line in our bordering communities.
I might have missed this, sorry, this might, I think my last question. I might have missed this, but in terms of trying to predict fluctuations and that floor that we can't go beyond, we don't think we'll run up against that like next year, because it would be really a shame for the school to hit and then for us to have to like shift to like 1.6.
No.
1.65.
Can I take a stab at something? Because after you said it, I was just looking through that sheet that you gave us on the calculation. To the self-leveling, when we're forced to that number, it's almost painless between commercial and residential, when we're forced to that number.
Okay.
When we switch it ourselves, we inflict pain, so to speak. So just like a minute ago when you looked at the 170 to the 165 and you saw the differential, you saw all of a sudden there was commercial and residential shifted, right? Like the percentages, right? Better for commercial, worse for residential. When we're forced to do that, it's only a marginal differential, because what happens is there's just been a self-equalizing about that.
Right.
So the force isn't the thing that causes the pain. So that's not the thing. It's if that helps you make sense. It took Ben explaining, saying it, and for me to actually read that really boring reading.
Did you say that? Because I didn't hear
No, he hinted at it, and it made me read this thing, which is honestly like brain damage.
I don't think in my best moment that would be.
No, it's yeah.
But okay, so that answers that question. So good. So we're at 1.7, and then all right. Other thoughts? Does FinCom want to? I mean, do we have to vote, right? So I guess I don't want to kick anybody out, but I think.
So let me just ask. So for us, I mean, we're going to do this all in one. Does anybody have a problem with the other recommendations? The 1.7 from staff, the no small commercial exemption, which would be repealing something that for the last 3 years we've done, and no change otherwise from fiscal year, on the exemptions, no change, and the split, no change otherwise from last fiscal year. Is that, so really what we're talking about is the use of free cash?
Yeah.
Okay. Does FinCom, I guess we can ask them if they, although it's our vote on these things, do they have opinions to the differ?
So I have a question as to why, like that small business benefit was given for a reason, right? Or with a hope in mind, presumably. Like why don't they know about it? Why don't they take advantage of it? Why, or is it just not? Is it not working? Is it not working? Why isn't it working?
So I think, I mean, I don't know about the why don't they know about it portion. I guess, these hearings aren't so exciting that lots of people tune in, but I think
until then.
The dollar amounts aren't so large to where you might just pay your tax bill and you might not notice. So on the exemption side, some of the dollar amounts are $200, and so over the course of a year, you might not notice that difference. as a small business owner. So I think the reason it was given in the past is because it was something for the small businesses, and everybody wants to help small businesses. So I think that was kind of the thought process in the past years.
And in past years, if I remember, there was only like two, I'm not good at timelines, but there were like two businesses that had taken advantage of it, and then the following year they didn't. So could have been a, oversight, but it obviously wasn't. So to Ben's point, I think,
We've
such
reached
a positive
out,
impact that they
We've
made sure to reapply.
We've also reached out, and we just really didn't hear
Yeah.
that this was a real need. This is a program that, DOR offers. We've tried it out for the last 3 years. I think Ben physically went out and tried to engage all of them, and
Marzi did too.
they just, Marzi has also gone out, and we just didn't hear that it was providing that need. We had thought that, if this was, helpful, maybe we'd see investments in the building or properties, maybe the property owner would see this as a real benefit. That's not really materializing. And we also, frankly, we've thought more about, what happens if you have a triple net you're a small business in a building that doesn't qualify. And we don't want to inadvertently place any additional burden on a small business that may be struggling with just keeping their business afloat in Swampscott, given all the other circumstances we discussed earlier.
Yeah, so I'm going to say, Tim, let me just, as I think I probably suggested it 3 years ago when we first started it, to be honest with you. And I think the thought process of that board at the time was to see, I'm going to not correct Sean, but I'm going to say things a little different. I think everybody appreciates every dollar they don't have to pay in taxes, right? So, period, right? But I think we are interested in saying, what are these properties, and do we see, we were actually not thinking about savings as much as who's getting the savings, or are we seeing improvements in properties that are benefited by these savings? For example, is there something accretive back? If we invest back into these properties, are we seeing something, right? Either tenants are getting the benefit, and I think Ben's slide showed you that by and large, no. Kinda, but also, are there things happening different with these properties, right? And when you really look at what these properties are, they're not the ones that you instinctively would think of. And I don't think we have a good answer on are things improving generally about the properties? Are they putting money back in? I don't know if you're seeing differences. I'm not notably anyways. So I just think as though, given the fact that just the larger commercial taxpayers pay for it anyways, right? It's just reallocating commercial taxes. And again, those are some of the small business, a lot of, frankly, more small businesses are getting hit with this than benefited with this, because we have more, we have 26 properties, but we have well more than 26 small businesses, if you will. And a lot of these businesses are buildings that house contractors or things of that nature that aren't what you would think as, mom and pop retail or something like that too. So a lot of them that are in bigger buildings like on Humphrey Street aren't getting the benefit of those, even though they're small mom and pop shops. They're actually paying more to pay for that exemption.
Okay, other questions before you guys sign off? Or don't? Do you?
Anybody else on FinCom?
So do you all want to adjourn your meetings? Is that, and then we would, is that how?
This is Tasia. Can I ask a question, actually?
Of course.
If you could you go back to that slide where they showed the excess levy capacity?
That's it.
Thank you. So this is an amazing slide because it just shows how stable our levy has been, but the levy capacity keeps growing and growing, and that's concerning to me. So I just wanted to put this out there since we're all together here, FinCom and Select Board, and the assessors. At what point do we start discussing an underride to limit this? It's just going to get bigger and bigger year over year.
There are actually some conversations that have already begun with FinCom and this board about creating potentially a guideline relative to that. So it's a good question, and I think the conversation's percolating.
Great, okay.
And I
Thank
think if that, part of the, you know, we just, a year ago, whatever, created the financial guidelines. So I think just the possibility, discussing the possibility of including some kind of range in that guideline, just to your point, Tasia.
Yeah, I've actually researched this a little bit and tried to find out what the excess levy capacity is in other municipalities in the state, and I haven't found any that have anything this high. So I think it's a very good thing to consider.
Look at Peabody's.
I haven't looked at Peabody's. What is Peabody's?
Yeah, cities are oftentimes their cities' excess capacity is traditionally higher on average than towns. So he's pointing to a city, and he's right, but it's
Not a fair comparison.
it's little apples and oranges, a little bit. So,
I just want to throw out there, this is something that rating agencies look at as a sign of financial strength. And to simply come in and say, cut your excess levy capacity because you're worried that somehow, you know, a future board might come in and just spend it all, like, you'll do more to hurt your financial footing. And it may be a Pyrrhic type of victory from some financial discipline perspective, but you will pay a price for it with rating agencies.
Yeah, well, so actually that's interesting because I did speak with Ron Mendez about this maybe last year, and he did explain to me where that point is, where it impacts your bond rating, and I remember it being significantly lower than where we are now. So, you know, I'm not suggesting that we eliminate it completely, but definitely bringing it down. It's just growing exponentially, and I mean, we've been in a great place financially, like with our bond rating for some time now. So I think it's just time that we really look at it and get that conversation going.
Thank you, Tasia.
Thank you.
Okay, then. Motion to adjourn, well, Tim, you do what you want to do with your FinCom.
Yeah.
Do you have a motion to adjourn your meeting?
Second.
I move to adjourn.
Moves to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's hard for me to take a vote here, but because I can't see everybody. Can you get rid of the excess levy capacity? I mean, not with an underride, but just get it off the screen.
Good thing you clarified, Tim.
See Eric, Cinder,
Aye.
and Mary Ellen.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Patrick and Ben.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. The assessors?
Sorry. Laura, can you make a motion? Make a motion to adjourn? Or second? Laura, are you there?
I think I heard her.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. Well, good night.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, then, so. Well, anyone want to make a motion?
calculated. I'll ask in a second. I move that the board select a residential factor of 0.941976, a CIP shift of 170.311% for the fiscal year 22 tax levy. And in order to implement this policy, the board hereby authorizes Sue Duplin, town clerk, to certify this vote on the Massachusetts Department of Revenue's gateway system. Why don't you just do them all?
Yeah, can you
Okay.
keep going?
I also move that the board choose not to adopt a residential exemption for fiscal year 22. And I also move that the board choose to not adopt a small commercial exemption for fiscal year 22.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to talk a little bit more about free cash, because this is our moment to do it, because it's not otherwise on our agenda tonight, because the warrant's not on our agenda. I just want to hear people's thoughts, I mean, because I think we got to solve it. So I wouldn't make a motion for 155. I wouldn't. I just think as though it's time to start. What's happening is, frankly, is in some ways, we are not using free cash at the time that we're budgeting to balance the budget, not using free cash. But then we get to November knowing that damn well we're going to use over $1 million of free cash. And so maybe there's chronological separation, but I don't know if there's intellectual separation, because we so know that we're going to do it every year. Like, I just feel like, I frankly think as though for us, the ones who kind of have to, anyways, I support 1 million, not 155. Again, someone else wants to make a motion at 155. I will probably go along with it, but I also would be okay if FinCom ultimately decided they wanted to recommend to town meeting something higher. That's their prerogative to do that as well, right? I just feel as though it's time to have that discussion. So anyways, I'm just throwing that out there as a conversation, because I think there's...
Well, I mean, I think I expressed the same thing, or if I didn't, that's why I was pointing that out earlier, so I'm not, I get that. I mean, I agree.
I'm all for keeping our taxes as low as humanly possible, obviously. So I take this decision very seriously. I just think we have so many needs, so many infrastructure needs in our town. And we also have this structural issue that we're facing. I support $1 million use, and we can reserve that $550,000 for another use, another day. So I would support the $1 million. I still think that the increase to the median single-family tax bill is sub 2%, which is unheard of in times such as these. I think that's very manageable and very doable, and so that's kind of where my head is.
so are you revoking your motion?
No, he didn't make a motion. I didn't make a motion for free cash. There's no motion for free cash.
I thought you were saying to,
No, this is just the residential factor.
wait, I just want to reread the motion, sorry.
It's on the screen if you want.
Oh, no, but I can't, there's a light like right in the middle, so I can barely see that, thanks.
This is the Reader's Digest version.
No, I'm sorry, you're right, okay, I just got sidetracked because of Peter's conversation.
It's like the large print edition.
Okay,
So I am.
oh, you mean I get it, all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I share the concerns on the use of free cash, and appreciate you raising it, Peter. I guess I'm just struggling with like when we start to do this, and I guess there's never a good time, right? But I think this year is still a particularly hard year. And just wondering if now's the right time, even though it's a relatively minor increase, so to speak. But if we do it now, or if we decide that it can wait another year before we start to wean ourselves off, so to speak. But I don't disagree with what you said, David, and I think that free cash can be used for other purposes, and I also think that, like water and sewer rates, we need to start getting into a habit, if you will, of being accustomed to not just a level tax rate, but I guess I'm struggling with whether this year is the year to do it, given the increases in costs and essentially everything else. For residents. But
Okay. So we can't, regardless of that, we're still comfortable with David's triple motion? Okay.
Yeah, the only reason I'm bringing it forward here is
No, I
because
get it.
someone's gonna write an article about what we just did for taxes, and there has to be an assumption of free cash to write that article, right? And so when I say that, I just don't want people to be misinformed, because if there's no free cash talked about with this, then they could argue and say that we just raised it 3.79% for a single family, because that's what this chart says. And I just want to dispel it, whatever the percentage, whatever the free cash is, just dispel it and foreshadow what we're recommending. And then FinCom obviously has to recommend a town meeting, and they could recommend something different. And
Yeah.
I think there's something, so let me say it differently in a way, and I guess this is what I'm thinking. I think there's something, if FinCom seemed to like 155, and I'm a little bit posturing off of that, not for any reason except for the following. If they decide to go to town meeting with that, and select board was less than that, it gives us an opportunity to maybe, even in a sentence or two, start narrating this to town meeting, to share to town meeting the considerations, something that they wouldn't see if we're all in harmony. It's not like there's a violent disagreement here, but they wouldn't see it if we're all like, yeah, let's spend 155. They wouldn't hear the drumbeat, and in fairness to them, they shouldn't. I hope they have better things to do than sit and watch us right now and hear this discussion, and so they wouldn't hear this. And I think it's important for them to start hearing this, because they'll start feeling it, and they may not know where it's coming from in the future. And so even just that discussion, even if it's 2 sentences at town meeting, I think is a healthy thing. So the juxtaposition of us being at a number and having and et cetera.
So FinCom is, sorry.
Sorry, so that's a bit in my thinking here, because I think it's a healthy dialogue to bring forward.
It's a unique dialogue. There won't be many communities that have the ability to have that type of conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you were going to ask something.
When is FinCom's next meeting? Does anybody know? Monday, okay. So anyway, maybe they'll vote on, I don't know what their plan is for voting on the free cash warrant article, but we'll have more information the next time we have to decide on that. Sounds like what their recommendation will be. So, okay. All in favor of David's motion, seconded by Neil?
Aye.
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 Aye. So do we have direction that we're using for ourselves on the free cash? Because again, I think we need to articulate our opinion on free cash tonight.
Oh, that's
Because
what
we just set a tax rate, if you will, that isn't based on a net number, if you will, at the moment. So we have to staff anyways, I think, to the public channel where we are on free cash. Even though it's, it's not our recommendation to town meeting, but for the tax rate setting, it's FinCom's recommendation at the end of the day. The way town meeting works, strangely enough.
I will make a motion to recommend allocation of $1 million of free cash.
I don't think we can, though. Is this what you wanted, is this what you're suggesting? It's not, nothing's on the agenda.
Well, we're setting the tax rate, and I think as though this would fall under the tax rate.
So, okay.
I'm just saying we're not making,
Just
we're not,
go
we're
ahead.
not, we're not recommending on the warrant, is what I was saying in that. So I think you can, but again, you've got to be comfortable with it. I think this is part of the tax rate setting for us.
I just thought I was getting at that with David earlier, but that's fine. Go ahead. So, go ahead, whoever's making a motion.
I have a motion to recommend allocation of $1 million of free cash.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
You want none? Just joking.
Okay then, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Second.
Did you say
Second.
anything? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're moving on to the
Thank you,
first,
gentlemen.
I'm a no on that.
on what?
Closing.
Closing the public hearing.
I'm like totally exhausted by,
Losing it.
yeah, just stop. We're having a first reading of the I&I policy.
So, as I mentioned earlier in my report, we've been analyzing peer communities. You have a draft of a policy before you that contemplates establishing a regulatory framework, thank you, gentlemen, that would help Swampscott really address some of the significant infiltration and inflow. The team that is reviewing this have looked at really where's the right balance. I've argued that we should actually start off in a pretty aggressive position. We have serious needs, and we don't know where they begin or end. We're in the middle of a significant asset assessment that will help us determine, the extent of the condition of all of our sewage and drainage pipes. And once we get that done, I think we can come back next year and dial in, as other communities have done, as they have started to address some of the I&I issues that impact their system. We're not under a compliance order. Most communities that establish this type of infiltration policy are forced to do this under a consent order. We're doing it because it's a best practice, and we understand the environmental stewardship responsibilities that are before us. I do think that, the thresholds may seem high, but we really did look at what a single-family home would generate in terms of flow, and we tried to establish just a couple of tiers that would really trigger that multifamily approach. And the more tiers that we do have, I think the more we may see folks come in and try to change the scope of that development to try to fit a square peg into a round hole, or try to argue that, their development might not trigger that significant threshold. So, that said, I'm happy to answer any questions I can, or get back to the board at the next meeting when we have Dave Peterson and Gino available to answer any technical questions that you might have.
Sean, do we have an idea of what this is costing us? I think we saw a number where 58% of our wastewater was through was from I&I. That number has been decreasing over the years. It could be from weather, it could be from other things. What is this in hard dollars cost?
I don't have that number offhand. I know that we had that number in that PowerPoint presentation. I'll go back and take a look at that.
Yeah.
We actually, that came up as part of our, some of the analysis that we did. Like, they were projecting upwards of 50 to 60% of the flow
Yeah.
goes to Lynn Water and Sewer.
Yep.
For treatment during a major storm event. And so Gino had mentioned to me that he doesn't believe that we get charged for that additional flow, because during those events, all communities, inundate Lynn Water and Sewer, and they don't bill us with that same fee.
So maybe not dollar to dollar at 58%, but 43% because
That's right.
we
So
have
there's some
more,
charge.
we have more
Right.
inflow, if you will, and infiltration, but.
But that's a question I'll get back to
It's a great question.
on,
It's a great
because
question.
we did do some of that analysis. I think you're gonna see, it's, during these rain events, there's a significant I&I cost element that we bear.
And then, I mean, are we looking at setting up like I&I banking or something similar to that? Is that what we're talking about here with this, with this type of plan?
These will be special funds. It will be a dedicated fund that can only be used for infiltration, inflow mitigation.
No, I just meant, are we expanding the sewer users so to offset the amount of new flow they want to add to the system by reducing a greater amount of existing I&I? I mean, what exactly are we looking to propose? I mean, are we looking at offset ratios and costs and the information that was in the packet was, some of the information was based upon 2007, the Ponset watershed data. 2007 was 15 years ago.
That's right. So that's why we've looked in and we've kind of adjusted our fee structure to be 2021 vintage, and so it looks a little different than the 2007, but these are impact fees. And so the way you kind of establish the impact through case law and through promulgations of regulation is to kind of borrow, what has worked. And the Ponset I&I was a best practice, and we've looked at other communities and we've tried to model what makes sense. And what makes sense is get in, start it, learn, and start, addressing those critical needs. Like we went through that presentation, we just showed it's all clay pipes everywhere. And, the infiltration into those pipes over the last 80 to 100 years have really created a environmental impact that is going to be costly, and we're going to have to kind of figure out how do we solve that. This will allocate a small amount of funding. It's not going to solve everything, but it's going to be another tool in the toolbox that can help us address these long-range goals.
But it's going to require us, not only collecting these I&I fees, but also making an investment in our infrastructure as well. This is just something that will help us supplement.
We're under a consent order to make investments already, with Stacy's Brook. There likely will be additional, responsibilities as state regulators continue to look at these types of responsibilities. I think putting this in place will help us check a box of best practices that many communities are being forced to do through compliance.
Yeah. Okay. No, and I agree with your assessment that we should be very aggressive initially. Just from this light reading that I had from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs Watershed Improvement from the Ponset, it talks about how an NWRA community adopted an offset ratio of 4-to-1 and set the base mitigation fee equal to the MWRA transport and treat cost. Ignoring local operating and capital costs, the resultant fee would total $45.60 per gallon of new sewage. Perhaps not surprisingly, none of the municipalities interviewed said the I&I fee, even with the application of an offset ratio, fully covers its I&I mediation costs. So this was 2007. Obviously, costs have increased since then. So I just want to make sure that we're gonna be as aggressive as possible when.
I'm happy to be more aggressive. I actually, you know, would welcome some thoughts about whether or not, you know, we have the right structure. I think, you know, based on the peer group that we looked at, we're coming out ahead. And my thought was, you know, let's get some experience under our belt and let's come back. And once we get that asset assessment, I think we can come back and try to match our rate structure with, you know, the needs that are identified.
Yeah, I mean, Saugus had a 10-to-1 ratio, and then once progress was made, they were able to step down their offset ratio, just per this information that I researched. So that's something that we would consider, Sean?
It is, you know, Saugus is at $5, you know, Framingham's at 18, Burlington's at 12, Somerville's at 14, Waltham's at 12, and I think as this gets adopted and implemented in various communities, they do change over time, and I think Swampscott has to start, and we'll modulate, and we'll follow that same trajectory of how we incrementally solve these challenges.
So are we gonna be able to set this prior to the analysis and I guess the report that's underway right now, a consultant report?
I hope that the board will, and in fact, you know, it's my hope that we'll be back on December 15th, and we can have a conversation, potentially vote this for adoption. The goal was to get this in place, and we'll course correct it as we go forward. This is a best practice model. If board members have questions, you can email me or Gino, and I'll get it off to Dave Peterson. Happy to come back and discuss this in a more technical manner. But my thought was we'll come back on the 15th and we'll go through the presentation again, and we'll talk about the policy, and we'll model based on development over the last couple of years what we anticipate to generate for revenue. We tried to do that over the last week. We just couldn't pull all the building permits for today's meeting, but it's in the works, and you should see that sometime soon.
I had one other question too, just regarding the structure of the policy. Do certain projects receive preference over other projects?
We thought that once we get that asset assessment, there may be, it may be important for the town to determine where priority work goes forward because of the sequencing of other municipal work or other opportunities. So we wanted to retain some control over that.
Okay, and then are water conservation efforts also in consideration with this I&I remediation? Doesn't that sort of work hand in hand?
You know, water conservation is always in order, and we'll take a closer look at water conservation. I don't know offhand if water conservation is driving the II regulation.
You mean, can we pay for water conservation efforts with the I&I revenue? Is that what you're asking?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just saying, is that under, or are we trying to use less as well?
We haven't, that, water conservation has not come up in any of the conversations I've had associated with this policy. This is the first time that it has come up. I'll bring that back to the team, and we'll talk about whether or not conserving more water would help ensure there's less flow and less impact. Maybe there is a connection that we can strengthen from that.
Thank you.
All right.
Other questions?
Sean, you touched on it, and maybe you can bring it back on the 15th too, but in the tiers on the flat fees, I just wanted to have a better idea of like the flow rates for those tiers, where those numbers come from, and just also slightly concerned of the jump between, you know, if you have a flow rate of 999, and then if you have a flow rate of 1,000, you're paying $15,000 more dollars. So if these numbers are somewhat arbitrary, or if they have context for certain projects, and if those tiers can maybe not more tiers, but capturing more so that maybe that jumps not as.
It may just help you, you can reverse engineer, just use 110 gallons a day per bedroom, and you can reverse engineer what buildings, for the purpose of this, are in those tiers.
Okay.
Right, so the 999 one is a 9-bedroom development.
Right.
Right, just to give you a sense like that. So, and then after that, we're getting into just bigger. So it's arbitrary in the sense that at some point there's a cutoff and you go to this.
Yeah.
scale.
You use that 110 gallon?
Yeah, I don't know, like, if there's a way to do it where it's less of a jump, or if that matters necessarily, but it just seems, if you're building a 9-bedroom or a 10-bedroom, and that's a difference of $15,000, that seems.
We thought that would be pretty reasonable. Like, that's a 9-bedroom, 110 gallon.
Yeah, I going to 9 bedrooms, I think we're being, just from my perspective, we're being sui generis. I mean, that's.
I agree. So let's make.
No one's not going to build the 10th unit because it's going to cost them $15,000 more.
Yeah.
No one's not going to.
Not going to.
Right.
That's not the reason they're not going to build the 10th.
So,
10th bedroom.
but that's my
10th bedroom,
point, so maybe it shouldn't be 5,000, maybe it should be 8,000, I mean, that's what I'm saying, is just, do those numbers make sense? I'm not, it could be either way, but like, why?
Okay.
If that top tier is 5, and then jump to a $20,000 fee, I'm not saying that a higher fee is not in order, maybe it is, I just wanted to have understanding of that. So, and you can provide more of that on the 15th.
We will. Helpful conversation. We did talk about it today. I met with Dave and Gino. We talked about, where's the tier that will generate a significant amount of revenue. We thought, let's just draw the line where we're going to capture, a significant multifamily. 9 bedrooms is that, 3-family. Or larger, and we wanted to be a little bit more careful with some of the smaller, projects, just because, we have a reasonable number there that I think, applies some, obligation, but not something that would be overly difficult. But we'll
Right.
come back with a tier and a few options.
Yeah.
Again, the concern was everybody might try to, if we have too many, they might try to package.
Yeah, I get you.
That's
all I had.
Fire off any questions or concerns as we finalize the policy.
So we have a second reading on the 15th.
Yes.
So it'll be our next meeting. Do you guys have any other questions before we move on? Okay. All right, so next up, Sean, you again. Or is it? Yeah, no, I know, but that's usually, Marzi is, okay, sorry, okay. Hi, Marzi, which is why you're right there. On the screen. I'm just gonna walk away now. Okay, so we're gonna have an update on CNL liquor license.
Before we do that, could I just let you know that I did follow up with the developers of White Court, and the item is not needed for the closing. The easement is a post-closing issue, so we can wait, and we could do a second reading of the easement on the 15th.
Thanks,
And at
Marzi,
that
that's
point,
so
I'll have
great.
an opportunity to follow up with town council and, regarding the seating signage and obviously the lender issues.
All right, that's great. Thanks for the update.
You're welcome.
So we just continued the hearing, but I don't think we said till when. Do we have to say till when? To the 15th? We already did that? That's right.
Okay, excellent.
No, that's the auto dealer license.
Yeah, I was. Oh, yeah, oh my gosh. I honestly, David, I'm just handing the gavel to you right now. I'm getting it all wrong. Okay, go ahead, Marcy. Fill us in, and we appreciate the update.
Absolutely. All right. So on the 15th, we'll do the second reading. And then, so obviously I am here to just give you a brief update on CNL liquor store license. Shortly, you will hear from Angelica and Molly on the liquor license, entertainment, and common victuals renewals. As you know, CNL Liquor Store has been closed since September of this year. They are a liquor license holder. They will be looking, or they will be requesting this evening to renew their liquor license. We had seek Town Council and Alcohol and Beverage Control Commission's guidance in regards to how do we proceed, or how do we deal with a establishment that has that is not currently in operation. The advice that we received is that most towns would, or most licensing authorities would give a written, formal written to the applicant or to the liquor license holder or the individual seeking renewal, and will provide a time limit or limited amount of time in regards to how long the license would be in effect. So shortly in front of you, as I stated, Angelica and Molly will be here. We'll be talking about the renewals. So again, I just wanted to preface that you will, the request, I should say, and guidance from Town Council is to provide a written notice to the applicant in regards to the time that they will have to perform, because obviously the request or the guidance is not to hold a liquor license if it's not being used. And I'm here to answer, if you have any questions, I'm here to I'll be happy to provide it to you. I have been working with the current owner to assist him in finding additional a new relocation or a new suitable location for his establishment. But unfortunately, to date, a new location has not been identified.
Okay. Questions for Marcy?
Marzi, as far as a new location would be concerned, the former Baker's Daughter location in Humphrey Plaza, is that something that?
There is a potential restaurant that's looking at that space. I think that the property owner, as well as the Baker's Daughter, who actually has an existing lease, they are working with somebody to bring a new restaurant to that location. I think they're very close in formalizing the agreements.
Fantastic, thank you.
So Marzi, sorry, it's as of September 1st then, the 6 months that you're?
No, what I meant to say, I'm sorry, is that the CNL closed on September of this year.
Yeah.
Historically, just to let you know that the sort of other municipalities, what they would do is they would give a potential applicant 6 months time to renew the license, or just put them on notice that if they don't have a physical location within 6 months, then the license would be reverted.
Okay, it's standard application, okay.
That's correct. I know that I did speak with the owner, Fred, I'm sorry, Mr. Peralta. I'm not sure if he is here this evening, but he did say that he was going to call in. I don't know if you have any questions for him, or maybe that you can take that up when the discussion is focuses on the liquor license.
No, he's on. Oh, okay.
Well, no, I think she said if we had questions for him.
No, I know. I actually don't know that he's on. I think there was concern about his potential technical ability to speak, but we could certainly ask him if you have any questions specifically.
Yeah, I'm happy to also, if I can assist you in any way, we're here too. And I did speak to him, and I provided him the dial-in number as well as the Zoom login.
Okay.
So I could work with town council on issuing an official notice to start that 6-month clock, I think is what the next step would be.
Yeah.
So I could work on that and then pull you in, Polly, so you can take a look at that and if it makes sense, putting your signature on it to send that out, if the board feels that that's the right way to go.
Okay.
We can get that out by the end of the week, provided I get the comments from town council in a timely manner.
Okay. So, don't think we have many options here.
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay, so we,
Maybe, I don't know if it requires a vote, but maybe good measure is
should
just
just
make
do it in
a vote
case.
to put them on notice.
is there motion to approve, to renew the CNL package store liquor license with the condition of the 6-month timeline to utilize the license or else have it canceled. Is there more I should say? That's technical language in there.
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, use or transfer the license within 6 months.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So you'll write.
I'll get a draft.
We'll be in touch and then.
Yeah, exactly,
we'll
and
send
then
out the
I'll
notice.
share it with you, exactly.
Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Marcy.
You're welcome.
Okay, the
Thanks,
fun
Marcy.
continues here. Presentation and renewal of 2022 liquor licenses, sorry, just generally licenses. That's the next item on the agenda. That includes liquor licenses, common victular licenses, and entertainment licenses. And we have Angelica Noble.
I think Molly's gonna go first.
Yeah, okay, here, and also Molly joining us, and you'll be walking us through the different licenses. Thanks.
Yes, I'm just going to cover common vic and entertainment renewals and a couple of new ones tonight, and then we will be back on the 15th with the rest of them. These licenses are in process as inspections are ongoing, so the things that are in front of you tonight are ready to go. Allie, do you need me to screen share, or?
I have it if you need it, but if you want to do it, that's fine. It's only 4 slides, so either way.
If you have it up, that would be great.
I can pull it, yep, hold on.
Thank you. So I'll just start while we're waiting. The common vic licenses are for seating, and these licenses are renewed annually. The fee is $125, and they are inspected by Jeff Bond from the Health Department. It's required for any businesses that serves food, and we are currently coordinating those applications, and we renew them at the December of each calendar year. So the next slide has a list of the businesses that are on deck with their common vics that have been inspected and signed off on tonight. The one in bold is Nordhaven, and that's a new business going into the Taitani location. They're getting ready to open shortly, so they've got their common vic application in to be ready for that. And the rest of the businesses, or I would say in the case of some of them, organizations, are renewals. So I can answer any questions about common vics. It's pretty straightforward. But I'm happy to answer anything before I move on to entertainment.
I would make a motion to approve the 28 common victualers licenses shown on the screen.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So moving on to entertainment licenses. Entertainment, live entertainment covers everything from having a TV that's playing to hosting pub trivia to having live music and dancing. Obviously, the past couple of years have been a little different than than we normally have, and so we haven't really received any kind of complaints over the past year about these businesses, which is normally what we look to if we're going to recommend any changes to their licenses. Again, all these licenses that are recommended to you today also have common vics that have been signed off on. Many of them also will be serving liquor as well, and those get additional inspections. The ones highlighted are the new ones there. For Tucci's, It may have had one in the past, but they didn't have one last year, so that was just new to me. The Swampscott Senior Center is looking to do more entertainment, and those hours reflect. She's looking to do a night event maybe once a week, so I'm kind of covering that time. And then Zest Friends, which is another new business that opened on Humphrey Street where Nguyen's used to be. I think the only note I have is that for Mission on the Bay, on their license, it actually specifies certain decibel levels, and that's been in place for a while, and that will just continue to be in place on their license for that. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Again, these are not all the licenses. Some of them are still in process, and then we will bring the rest on the 15th.
Hey, Molly, is there a reason that there isn't uniformity between these entertainment hours?
Yes. So the CV has to cover all the hours that the establishment is open and serving food. The entertainment obviously can't or isn't necessarily all of those hours. It can't obviously be greater than those hours. Some of them are, looking to offer different things. Again, for example, like Batucci's having TVs on is basically what their entertainment is considered. So the TVs are on when the restaurant is open to serve food. Some things kind of variable.
Thank you.
They can choose an earlier, they can just, some of it's them asking for the earlier time, right?
Yeah, some of it's them asking and us checking on their background. Paradiso doesn't open till the evening, so, obviously they're not going to have entertainment earlier. So yeah, it kind of varies in between what the establishment is looking for, what we can consider, and what they have going on.
Okay. Go ahead.
A motion to approve the entertainment licenses as set forth on the screen.
Second.
All in favor? Is that specific enough? That's fine.
It's good enough for me. I'm going to list the businesses in the meeting minutes.
Okay, so great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Hi, Detective Delano. Welcome.
How are you? Good evening.
Great. So we're moving on to the last item with the renewals, which is liquor licenses. And
Ellie,
now,
do you mind
hi, Angelica.
share? Hi.
I think Angelica's got a really iffy internet connection.
Okay.
Do you mind just sharing your screen?
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. So I'll just go over the renewal process quickly, and then we can get into the specific businesses and any questions that you might have. So in late September, you can go to the next one.
Yeah.
Sorry. So in late September, that's when I am sent the renewal forms from the ABCC.
Yeah.
And then sometime in October, I send those packets to all the active licensees. And then I also send a list of the active licensees to the police department, the fire department, and the building inspector. The reason I do it in October is because for some technical reason, the ABCC requests that those forms are signed in the month of November. If they're signed on October 31st, they will deny it. And then so in November, the next slide, there's quite a bit that goes on. So the fire safety, there's a fire safety and building inspection that Rich Baldacci and James Potts do. And so after that, after those are completed, they would let me know. And so Diane did let me know that those were all completed and all the businesses were in compliance. Then we connect with the town accountants to see if any active licensees have outstanding balances. And so if so, they are contacted and they are to pay all outstanding balances by November 30th. The next thing is the fingerprints. So all of the managers, the appointed managers, have to come into the police station annual for fingerprints. And so the chief would sign off on that. And then we also request them to and require them to give their liquor liability insurance. And so all licenses, all paperwork has to be in by November 30th. And if it is not, according to the ABCC, their license is deemed not invalid, but they have to apply for a new license. And so then you can flip to the next slide. And then, so that brings us to today. So I'm here today to present to you all of the license, and the select board would vote on them. And from there, we would submit the renewal forms to the ABCC, and then the establishments are mailed or hand-delivered their new liquor license. And as I had said before, no license can be renewed or granted if there are payments due, inspections outstanding, or fingerprinting. But I'm happy to announce that there is none of that. So all license are totally in compliance with everything. So you can skip to the next slide. This just is a little overview of the fingerprinting. It's just a Swampscott bylaw, and it shows the annual fees. So $70 goes to the town, and $30 we submit to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So this is the types of license. So here we have section 12, which are on-premises license. That includes the restaurants, clubs, and veterans clubs, all alcohol, wines, and malts. And I won't go over it, but you can see the different fees. We also have the section 15, which includes the package stores, all alcohol, and wines and malts. We also don't currently have any, but we do offer the brown bag license, which means that patrons can bring their own beer and wine so long as they're ordering food. And then also a one-day permit. And I wanted to let you know that we had 4 issued in 2021. So that was good for those numbers there. You can flip up, it's loading.
You did?
Oh, yeah. Did it, mine just froze, but this is just a diagram or like a graph of all of the active liquor license here. So the red is the restaurants that offer all alcoholic beverages. The orange there is the one restaurant that offers wines and malts. And then we have the clubs in blue and the veterans clubs in dark blue, and then the package stores that offer all alcohol in green, and so on to the wines and malts. What I did do, because it is very confusing to understand the quota, so I put little stars on the special legislation. So that would be Cafe Avellino and Mexicali, and I believe that those were the special legislation in 2019 and 2018. And obviously the VFW is a veterans club, so that's also starred. You can skip to the next slide. So this is the quota for Swampscott. So I'm going to do my best to explain it. So we are allowed 17 licenses total. We have issued 14, but if you jump a little bit over and see that we actually issued 17, that's because the license approved under special legislation in veterans clubs are exempt from this count. So we're allowed 17, but also allowed the 3 exemptions. So that brings us up, which is why we have 3 available. Does anyone have any questions about that? Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. It's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, it's a little bit confusing. And then similar with wines and malts, we have 4 that were allowed. There's 1 currently issued, and so we have 4 available. And then the next slide is the off-premises license. So these are like our package stores. So we have 3 allowed for all alcohol, which all are issued. So we have 0 available. Wines and malt, 5 allowed and 2 available. So we currently have 24 licensed. So I'll go through these really quickly, and I'll stop if there's any like particular comments I want to make. But they're, like I said, they're all in compliance. All the managers came in for fingerprints. Fire safety is all set. So you can, I'll just read through them really quickly.
I just wanted to stop for a second. Do you have a desire for her to go through them one by one, or do you want to just do what Molly did and just kind of show them all at once and see if you have any questions? It's up to you entirely. Well, she can do it wicked fast.
It's totally up to you. There's only like 4 ththings that I want to mention, just so you
Why
have
don't you
the back of
highlight
your
what you
mind.
want to mention? I think that's helpful. And then yes, thanks.
Okay, Allie. So Bertucci's is all set, in compliance. Cafe Avellino, same. She also same. G Restaurant is all set. Gourmet Garden is all set. Hawthorne by the Sea is all set. Mexicali all set. Mission on the Bay. All set. So Nordhaven, Molly did touch on this, but they're not open yet, and so he will notify me once he opens, and then he already has his 2021 license, but once he opens, he'll let me know, and we can bring down his new license. Paradiso's all set. So Uno, everything is all set with Uno, although they have a new manager, and so there is a pending change of manager application that we will talk about in the next item, but I just wanted to touch upon that. Yans is all set. Zest Friends. Zest Friends, this is something I just want to mention. So they would like to submit an application to change their hours of sales. And so that will be hopefully submitted at the next select board meeting, but just so that you're aware of it. And then the on-premises retail, so Chipotle. Chipotle informed me yesterday that they are not going to renew their license for 2022. She had said it was a last-minute decision, and it's what's better for their business. And so with that being said, we would just let the ABCC know that they're not renewing, and that's really all we have to do on our part. And then these, so St. John is all set. Swampscott Club is all set. They're really all set. I think the next one, the Yacht Club, is good. The VFW is the last one I wanted to touch upon, is they have a change in manager. Their past manager, George Fitzhenry, I believe, he passed away in 2021, and so Malcolm Maloon, who is involved in the VFW, has submitted a change of manager application, which we'll speak about in a little while. And then I believe that's all. Everything else is all set.
You already voted on CNL.
Yep, already spoke about CNL. And then the only thing is the last slide. Oh, Little G Provisions, just to touch upon that really quick. So they are one of our new license, and they are, their business is up and running. And so I just wanted to point that out. And the next slide is where I'll pass it on to Detective Ted Delano. He will explain the compliance checks that we do and other administrative things that Ted does.
Hello. Just quickly on an overview, that the notice that's on the screen right now is posted every year by law. We have to post that. It's stamped in with Sue Duplin. It's at the town hall, published in a newspaper, and in the lobby of the police station. And then we proceed on that. We monitor the establishments for any type of events that could arise from any disturbances or questionable conduct, and we actually follow up face-to-face with the manager. One thing that is also provided quarterly is Lynn District Court provides us with the names and the organizations where someone, if they had a motor vehicle infraction and were arrested for operating under the influence, and that establishment was in Swampscott, we would get notified of that. Throughout the year, we do administrative checks to make sure they have the proper signage for underage service, serving someone that's intoxicated, and making sure that license is posted. Once we post that minimum age compliance check that covers us for the year, we have an extremely positive relationship with the ABCC. We do the minimum age compliance checks, and there's a set of documents that are produced that are signed off, and we have been doing it for myself. I've been doing it for about 20 years now, and it's an educational tool for the establishments to ask for identification.
Detective, are you all set?
I am.
Ally, should we touch upon what normally happens if there's someone who does serve underage? Did you want us to touch upon that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So, the process is that, we, grab a minor, that could be from the community, could be from, contacts throughout, maybe an intern at another police department. They come to the station, they sign a release, with the parent present. The investigation is a confidential investigation at that time. We go over the process of entering into the establishments. During this process, the minor is with one of us in the detective unit. The other two detectives are also deployed. There is a field observation report that is done for each establishment. Basically, it lists the establishment, and it breaks down into if identification was asked, who served, and a description of that person. And then we always ask the minor to grab the receipt. If there is a sale, we go back in right away. We identify the individual that had sold it to the minor. Minor never consumes any alcohol at any time. We speak to the manager and we advise him that we are the designated selectmen and the hearing from the Board of Selectmen.
So I guess I'm a little confused what, and I mean this just because I don't understand, and I'm sure there's a reason. I don't understand the minimum age purchase compliance checks relationship to what we just were introduced. Why are we hearing about this? Just
I
seems-
believe I was asked just to give you an overview of how it is posted to make sure that we do post according to Mass General Law, and the police department is the ones that enforce underage purchases, and that's just a tool that we use to make sure that we do not have minors purchasing alcohol within our community.
So Detective, is this, I'm sorry,
No, I was just going to ask.
is this something that we typically do right around the fall, or is this something that we do all year round as part of a compliance enforcement?
Most of the time, it's done in that November bracket that Angelica talked about. We have done it in the past, in the March or
Fourth of July, Labor Day weekend, Memorial Day
Correct.
weekend, the big times where we might see, activity that would be a risk.
Yes.
So I guess I'm now associating compliance checks with licensing. Isn't that what we're, so why, that's what my question is, I guess.
I think
if
that,
we're talking about license renewals, how do compliance checks fit into that?
I believe it's being presented to you tonight as the overall system that we do in regards to at the police station, whether it be Angelica doing her work or our ongoing endeavors throughout the year for the establishments.
So there's not any sort of relationship between like if someone was compliant or not, like should we not push their license through? I think that historically it's been spoken of, the presentation that the person gives is a whole overview of the whole process of the liquor license, not just those being approved or denied.
Compliance does not have any bearing on renewal of the license. What Angelica outlined as what is required by the ABCC is the fire inspection, the liquor license, the signed form, and then we have some of our own requirements. Compliance is not one of those requirements.
So someone could, so someone or everyone could not be in compliance.
I think I think what's probably important for us to share is that we've done the compliance assessment, and information will be provided to the board likely in January with a number of firms that likely will have to have a hearing. That said, that's part of our annual compliance responsibility, and the police department, has conducted it this year, and it typically is not linked to the approval of the license. This is not a, there's a due process associated with that, and there's a public hearing that we have to provide, and, it's just a formal part of ensuring that these establishments adhere to the law.
Understood.
Questions?
No. No, I mean, I just had some other issues that, some other questions that came up that are not gonna be resolved tonight. So my motion is to table this until our next meeting on December 15th.
Does anyone have opposition or? Don't all speak at once.
Is there any reason that tabling it to the 15th is problematic in terms of the process for you, Angelica, or anyone else?
I work 2 jobs, so I can't be at the meeting on the 15th. But
From a state standpoint, no. They just need to be
No.
voted on by December 15th. I'm sorry, by December 30.
I was like, wait.
Yeah, 31st.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're saying that there's some concerns with compliance that we might be hearing about in the new year, but as they relate to licensing and renewals, all of these businesses are compliant that you've introduced tonight.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Angelica and Detective. So I guess we'll table this until the 15th?
Sure.
Well, that's your request. Otherwise, we
That
have
is
to
my
vote on it. Okay. Okay.
Seconded by?
Do we have to second a
No,
postponement?
It wasn't a hearing or anything.
Right.
Yeah. We'll
That was
just
Sean's
continue it?
fault.
We'll continue the hearing.
That's all,
All right.
yeah, I don't think this.
It's not a hearing.
It's not a
It's not a
hearing.
hearing, we're just
We'll put it on the December
put it
15th
on the
agenda.
and vote on it.
So are all of them being tabled or just?
All of them are
specific-
being
Okay.
tabled, yep.
Okay, so, okay.
You and I, we can talk, Angelica. I'll take,
But it was a great presentation, Angelica.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you, Detective.
Angelica and Detective. Okay. The next on the agenda is votes of the board. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the board. The select board may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any board member, any items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. Tonight, the consent agenda items are voting to approve meeting minutes from 11:17 and 11:22:21, and a vote to approve the change of manager application for Year of Swampscott, Mass. LLC, doing business as Uno Chicago Grill, and vote to approve change of manager application for Joseph L. Stevens, VFW Post 1240, located at 8 Pine Street. Is there?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Select board time.
Just want to acknowledge Swampscott Big Blue is currently leading as we enter the fourth quarter, 14-0 in the state finals.
What sport is that?
Football.
Oh.
Anyone else?
I don't have anything.
No? I do, and I'm trying to find it. I'm sorry, I'm so unprepared. Why would I be ready? All right. We I got a letter yesterday, I guess, morning, informing the town that the property at 40 Archer Street or 54 Foster Street, I think that's the Vaughn Place property, that they have submitted a 40B application for 160 units of rental housing.
How many?
160 units of rental housing at that site. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that letter. I can send it to all of you. Sean's. I've
We've
sent it
already
to Sean
reached
and
out
Marzi.
to Mass Housing to request an extension.
We have a
for
30-day
period of comment, so we can
to respond.
address all of our concerns about public safety and
160. How large is the lot?
4.8 acres.
Got it.
So we have 30 days to submit a letter of concern, and Marzi has reached out, as Sean said, to request an extension of time. She's hopeful that that will be granted. But in the meantime, so I think we're going to ask Marzi to come back at December 15th, shaping up to be a very, oh, hi Marzi, dense meeting, but to come back and kind of talk more details about that. But in the meantime, I think if one or two members are willing to help Marzi kind of take a first stab at that letter, I think Marzi and I and would appreciate the help. So if anyone's interested, please, you can say so now or reach out to Marzi, but one or two of us would be helpful. Did you want to say anything, Marzi? Feel free to add, or correct me if I misspoke about anything.
No, I think that you covered it. So as you stated, the comment period, the town does have 30 days to respond regarding the project to Mass Housing. I did the request that I put in, that the time request that I submitted to Mass Housing is to grant us an additional 30 days to go through the end of January. We're entering the holiday seasons, and obviously this is a serious project. And at the same time, I want to make sure that we do two things. Once again, seek grant funding to have a consultant to really assist our ZBA through the process, really guide the process, and also to allow us the time to take a look at the way we calculate the subsidized housing inventory. There are obviously two ways to count subsidized housing. I'm sure you're aware of. One of them is just to look at the number of actual units that are in various levels of subsidies that are on the record with the Department of Housing and Community Development. And the other way would be to look at land area and compare it to the, once again, the number of units. So I had reached out to the Department of Housing and Community Development to really assist us with that process, to fully understand it and to really look at the calculation to see if our actual number is higher than it is right now. So again, I'm happy to work with you. We do have some time to draft the letter.
Marzi, do you mind just emailing the board or through the chair or Sean, just the package from DHCD, please?
So they're going through Mass Housing. They're not going through DHCD.
Okay, Mass Housing. Whatever package we have with information on the project would be great.
Absolutely. As soon as I'll make sure to forward it to you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Marzi. Well,
You're
on that
welcome.
high note, does anyone have anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.